Can you hear me okay?
Hey, what's up, buddy? I can hear
Hold
you.
on. Let me change it to I don't know why you're coming through my speakers. Bear with me just a sec.
Sure. You don't want me on the surround sound,
No,
especially
no.
especially if people taking a nap. I get it.
Microphone 2, Pro Chat, audio input. No, that's good. Here we go. All right. Yep.
You sound good to me. I already started the recording when I popped in here just to make sure everything was working right because it's been a
Yeah.
minute.
Yeah. So I have a mic and everything set up because I do stream.
Hmm.
I was trying to set up I haven't done it in a while. I run two businesses, but right now I've just been working on my e-commerce site. And
Hmm.
it's just been back to back with shit to do. But
Hmm.
hopefully I'll get the camera fixed before streams end. I'm supposed to be on Prime's panel on Monday.
Nice. What's the topic?
I don't know. I don't know yet. Usually he sends it like a day before, right? So
Dude,
or day of, and I'm like, okay, you know.
I
But
did it. I did it once a couple of weeks ago, and I like Prime. Don't get me wrong, but I hated the experience, to be quite candid with you, just because I we got the topic the day of, and like he was very gracious, like making the offer to me, especially because I made it known that I'd love to do a panel, and the people there were cool, but I like being able to prepare adequately. And when I have a day job too, I don't. It's not two businesses, but it's a full time day job. And when you're trying to make sure that you know what the hell you're talking about and you're not talking out of your ass. And that's a lot to be like, hey, look, here are the two topics of the day. They're news stories. Like one was a public school teacher basically was forced into resigning because she refused to use two students' preferred pronouns.
I
That was
saw
one
that. Yeah.
story. Yeah. And it was just like, and it got wildly out of control because like the topic spiraled. And I'm just like, I feel like I need much more advanced notice if it's going to be like an actual debate just to make sure.
You know
So,
though, with all of the with all of the information for those topics, I feel like they spiral enough to where, you know what, if you're not 100% versed on it, I think it's still worth it to go in there and just kind of get your feet wet rhetorically. Just
sure.
because like those conversations, they're gonna get out of control, right? They're gonna start spiraling into everything but the topic. So you might as well just try try to see how good you can kind of, get off topic and spar a little bit with people.
Th-
And
and they
that's what
did.
I'm looking forward to try to get my foot in the door. Shout out to Connor for looking out for me because he thinks I could represent us a little bit better, but we'll see. The resident center right guy there might be a little bit of an easy target, but
He would know because as one of the few center right guys in the space and one of the few who are well respected. I mean, this is a guy who can. He's definitely like he's like 90% scar tissue. I think rhetorically, like this man has been put through the ringer and he keeps going
I
back
know.
for more. He's very good at what he does. Um, but yeah, good luck to you on the prime thing. If you enjoy chaos, like if you can do it very well, as I've gotten older, I'm just like I'd rather just stick to like the particular topic, and then like if you want to change it, then like basically like let's put a pin in this and then move on to the next one, kind of keep it neat and orderly.
Right,
That was
right,
not
right.
it. That was not it. So it's just a bad fit for me, but I'll eventually try it again once like there's I feel like a topic because I typically like don't talk trans issues or like I don't want to say that I don't want to say culture issues because it's also political, but what I consider relatively niche culture issues, like I like to discuss more issues of broad policy. And part of the reason why I accepted the topic when he offered it is because I'm thinking, okay, I can kind of swing this into like a civil rights or a free speech thing, and it kind of again it just kind of spiraled out of control. So I think next time what I'll do is say just kind of stay in my lane. Like if the topic is offered and it's more of a culture war issue, then I'll probably just stay away from it because that's not my forte. um
Yeah,
but yeah.
I mean, I think I look, being even though I'm center right, I watch a lot of Destiny. Probably
Hmm.
primarily Destiny. I find him to be addictively entertaining. So
Sure.
I've been watching it for a very long time, and I see you on there a lot. So I
Hmm.
kind of I kind of get what your MO is, and I have a lot of respect for it because it seems like you try to stay out of the drama. You try to be pretty meticulous about when you input your opinion. However, um, the internet's the internet. you may
Sure.
you may be, I mean, take my opinion for what it's worth, which is probably not much, but it you're gonna I maybe try to go for some clip moments, maybe try to get a little more aggressive, even though it's just not within your nature. Just because if you're looking to grow, that's what's gonna make you grow, right? Is when you throw that shit against the wall and then something sticks. But
Yeah, yes and no. So it's interesting. Like that's certainly the conventional wisdom, and I do think that that would be the easiest way to grow, no doubt, no question about it. But then I look at people like Akana Boy or Rose Wrist, or I don't know if you're familiar with this one. He's actually, in terms of sub counts, he's bigger than probably both of them combined. Luke Beasley.
mhm,
He was a David Pakman correspondent, does his own channel. He's up to like 40,000 subs in 6 months. And he's kind of the same kind of mellow, just like stick to facts, like do commentary, things like that. Like don't get into the weeds. And the problem is when I would, so I didn't do face to face or like camera debates until Jesus, probably 2 years ago, right? Everything before that was like on message boards, which
okay.
I think you and I are about the same age. I'm 31. How old are you?
37.
37. Okay, so you understand the era of, Reddit and message boards, HTML, where you're going back and forth. No, motherfucker, it's you, like, and you're typing like the meanest shit
Oh,
to one another.
of course, yeah.
Like I get that. I get that. But as over time and having a family that is predominantly center right or right leaning,
Mhm.
and you just over time you start to want to enjoy Thanksgiving for what it is, so you find like a more diplomatic approach to like discuss your differences. So I'm like that recovering roid rager who has just like become super zen as he's
What
gotten old, and I
Yeah,
like that. Yeah.
which is the way you really should be. I mean, obviously, I'm super family oriented. I'm Italian. It's my background. I mean, Christmas for us was 65 people, right? So, we don't fuck around. But so I'm all about family, and I greatly appreciate what you're saying.
Mhm.
But I think just in an internet so when you mention people like Rose Wrist, well, first of all, I would argue that Rose Wrist definitely has those moments where maybe it's facts and logic based, but where he has those moments where he kind of, yeah, you know, shits on you a little bit, right? So, but if you're talking about the slow and steady, factual based, I get it, and that's definitely something you could do. But I would just definitely look at the trajectory of those people. So you may have somebody who grows rapidly pretty quickly, and they may, have an audience that's really centered around very fact based, really nothing that's too extreme or bombastic. But where is their upward mobility? Is there a glass ceiling for them? You know what I mean? That they can't break through just because they're boring, or, well, what most people would consider boring in comparison. Because if you look at someone like Destiny, I would argue that he has a reputation for being a very bright guy. He has a reputation of being very facts and logical. But because of his mentality, I would say that's what broke him through to a point now where um it may have taken him a little longer, but I mean now he's stratosphere level, right? Like he's
Oh yeah, I
he's
mean,
not, he's on his way, right? Yeah.
you
So
look at it, and I think in the past 12 months, he's, 100,000 subs. Actually, no, it's more than that because he's already at like 602, 603,000. And I think when I started watching him, I can't remember what he was when I started watching because it was like March or April of the pandemic, so 2020. But I do remember earlier this year, like January or something like that. I think he and Vosh were like neck and neck, and Vosh was about 400,000. So
right.
he's grown like 200,000 subs in a year. It's
Yeah.
insane, no
Significant.
question about it. But I will say, as far as
Well,
like Destiny's,
and not to interject, but there is something to be said about, you know, if he did kind of tone it down a little bit, would he be more mainstream like a Rogan guest or something? But there's also the second half of that, which is it seems like he's going that way anyway, right? Like, but I don't know. Yeah.
no, it's interesting because I mean, I take your point. This is infotainment, right? At the end of the day, you have to deliver it in a way that is entertaining to people,
Right.
and
Yeah.
especially on Destiny's stream, trying to straddle that line. That's part of the reason why since the new year, I have not exercised my standing offer to just pop in whenever the hell I want, just because. So right now on my channel, I've rebranded. I'm no longer Ruminate. It's Pondering Politics. I've jumped up like for me, it's a big deal, but 100 subs in the last couple of days. I'm putting like a new banner, new logo, and everything else, different lights, and going about it a different way. And I'm taking more of a cue from, again, my buddy Luke Beasley, who's like puts out like 3 or 4 videos a day, kind of like David Pakman style, about a particular news story, offer some commentary, some feedback,
Right.
and then like anywhere from 3 to 10 minutes per video. Because the truth is, I don't like streaming. I don't play video games, unlike Destiny, unlike even Vosh. And because I don't have the audience that they do, there's really nobody to play off of. So you're just kind of this asshole who's just talking to himself, and like maybe 1 or 2 people in the comments section, maybe one's your grandma, something like that. So I didn't really enjoy that. That was just like 2 or 3 hours when I could have been, doing something else entirely. So I'm taking this approach where my model this year is to do more like, again, news commentary, political commentary, things like that. 2 or 3 or 4 videos a day, certain long form or longer videos, like 20 to 30 minutes about it. Like I did one yesterday, 2 days ago, about January 6th, and specifically how it's relevant to the peaceful transfer of power and President Washington and things like that. But basically do that because it worked for him. And again, he's already at 40,000 subs. It's a full-time job for him, making, whatever. But there's no question that Destiny taking a very rhetorically aggressive approach, and I mean he's had it for the longest time, but being like dropping F-bombs and having that banter back and forth and being willing to talk about salacious or spicy topics absolutely contributed to his growth. And I think you'd make the argument that his growth this past year is in large part because he shifted away from politics and more towards like just general social commentary and drama streaming and stuff like that, because I think it's the biggest growth, when he's on Fresh and Fit and ABBA and Preach, or ABBA and Peach, or whatever it is, and he's talking about red pill manosphere issues, and he's not just,
It's
yeah,
Preach, yeah, Ab and Preach, yeah, you were right the first time.
ABBA and Preach. Yeah.
Yeah.
So like, I mean, that also helps. Whereas other people, I think, have kind of plateaued. I don't think Vosh has grown considerably in the last year. I think he's hovering still like 110,000, or excuse me, 410,000, which is obviously great. But yeah, so trying to find that balance is tricky, especially since there are some things I just won't talk about. Like I have no interest in discussing Mr. Girl or, anything like that. That's just not my area of interest. I like Democrats, Republicans, policy. So I take your point, and I've got to find a way to make it a bit more palatable, a bit more engaging, without sacrificing, the principle of what I want to talk about. So that's my goal for this year. You stream too?
I do. So just give me 1 second. Bear
Sure.
with me just a moment. I do want to get this going streaming wide.
And you're getting a little robotic.
Am I? How about now? Am I okay?
No, it's still a little crackling. Try again.
Test 1 2.
Better.
Okay.
Better.
Right, just bear with me a sec here. I'm trying to stream to. Oh, here we go. Disconnect account because for some reason I had to. So just to give you a little history, and
You're cutting. I'm sorry, you're cutting out again.
I'm cutting out.
Super robotic this time. Yeah, like very crackly.
Really? Maybe I should try reconnecting.
Now you sound good again. I'm not sure what's going on off camera. If maybe like because I honestly don't know how Restream works very well. I just know how to use it. But like, I don't know if you do something else, or if you're pulling up like an alternate stream or trying to connect accounts or something, if that would affect the quality of your audio. But
maybe I closed out some other tabs. I don't know if that sounds better.
You sound fine now.
You sound fine. Okay. Yeah. So
yeah.
Just in terms of like, just because you said a lot there, which is fine. Just want to address what you were saying,
sure.
and kind of agree with a lot of what you're doing is not to be understated. So, you sound pretty similar to the way I am, in terms of branding and being really meticulous about logos and naming and stuff like that. It's not easy, but it's very important. So the fact that you're kind of going that route is very, very good. I mean, I had a YouTube channel. I still have a YouTube channel. I did like tech and gaming, and I actually started to gain quite a bit of traction, was doing really well. Then I got a pretty big promotion at work and had to stop. But recently
Oof.
I
Well, I mean,
yeah,
congratulations. I mean, that I feel like that's a good problem to have, right? But
yeah, so I mean, just kind of, I don't have many regrets in life. Probably one of them is stopping uploading, even though it took a lot of work to kind of do that every day. Because a lot of the people I was collaborating with at the time are now at like, a million plus subs. So that's probably where I would be. I was getting like 20, 30 subs a day towards the tail end. I had Corsair sending me some stuff. I had some of the bigger brands sending me, tech stuff to review, and everything was kind of getting to that level. Was making a few hundred a month, that kind of thing. But I started doing well in my career, so I really can't complain, financially. But
right,
recently I started getting back into exploring other options of revenue, and I started this e-commerce website. I don't want to dox myself too much, just in case, but
fair.
I'll send you some stuff behind the scenes. And a lot of that,
Well, you
I
sent
went,
me your OnlyFans earlier, so I mean,
yeah,
by the way, your feet are impeccable. He has
yeah,
some of the
thank
best
you.
feet out there. If I upload this to YouTube, I just want you to know the best feet you've ever seen in your life.
Yes, a little dry, but I'm sure you love them. Yeah, so I started getting and being the way I am, and just kind of understanding the importance of branding and being pretty significantly a perfectionist. Hiring somebody to kind of do that stuff was not an option, so I spent like countless hours just doing everything myself. So I can definitely empathize where you're coming from with all that stuff. And no, look, if that's if that's how you want to be,
Yeah, I'm so sorry. You are cutting out again. I am so sorry. I don't know. I don't think it's anything on my end. I haven't pulled anything up. It's just this and Twitter.
hold hold on, maybe it seems to be whenever is it doing it now?
Mhm.
It's not clear.
No, it's not clear.
Okay, I think it's whenever I have this. Oh, I'm going to try closing OBS. Is it clear
You
now?
sound fine now. Yeah,
Okay,
you sound
it
great.
must be OBS for whatever reason.
If this helps, I will send you. I'll just send you the file
Yeah, just do that.
when
Okay.
we're done.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Um, yeah. So, no, no, I get it. I can appreciate, wanting to brand and everything, but yeah. I mean, the reason I kind of wanted to. Do you want me to kind of give a background of where I'm coming from in terms of?
One 100%. The only thing before we
Yeah,
get
sure.
started into that, do you have like any particular goals? Like, so, not for the conversation, we'll get into that, but as far as like this year, so I told you I was doing a rebrand. My goal is to my personal goal is to kind of mimic what again my buddy Luke Beasley's done and hit 40,000 by the end of the year. So I'm going to put out a gazillion videos. They're going to be good quality. Got to be proud of them. But my goal is to 2 or 3 videos, maybe 4 videos a day about like relevant political news stories and relevant political topics. Have conversations like these that I find are substantive and are purposeful, either with fellow lefties or good faith conservatives. Maybe do debates, maybe stream occasionally with my buddy Staxiums, but that's the goal this year for me personally for pondering politics. If you're going to get back into streaming, do you like have any sort of 2023 aspirations? Because you said your previous channel was more tech, right? Or
Yeah, I
are you
do.
going to get
So,
back into that or do more politics?
no, no. So, yeah, I do have some goals in terms of streaming. So, I think so I have a habit of obsessing over something until I master it, and then becoming very bored of it.
I
Um,
get that.
yeah. So unless it's like a passion, and this passion of mine was this e-commerce store I opened, so I find it really really fun to kind of get into that. And my other passion is just stuff like this, right? Culture war conversations, just um relevant topics, news stories, politics, whatever the case is. So I did start streaming last year. I have a couple of streams on my channel that I'm moving over to a politics channel now, because I don't want it to be on the same channel as all the tech stuff. So this year, my goal, I would say, is not take it seriously, but to have fun with it. I'm not going to set a super strict schedule, but I would like to at least be on maybe a panel a week, do a stream a week, something like, maybe Adam and Sitch do, like maybe like a couple of hours stream. But honestly, I want to meet people. I want
Yep.
to I want to make friends. I want to, like this, right? Like I want to have people that I communicate with on pretty significant basis that I whether agree with or disagree with, and we can have some engaging conversations and have some fun. Because right now on the online space, I don't really know anybody, so just to kind of shake some hands virtually or whatnot would be fun to me. I'm already good financially. It wouldn't be a financial thing for me. I'm a writer,
Right.
got a nice house, got 2 kids. That I'm good with that. This would be just strictly for
Your passion.
seeing where it goes. Yeah, a passion, right? And just
Yeah.
kind of just for relationships.
No, I respect that. Connor sounds like he would be, as far as like, conservative or center right, sounds like you've made a good inroad there. I know he said something about putting together a panel sometime at the beginning of this year,
Yes.
to
Yep.
kind of take Hippy Dippy's place. So that would be good, especially since this space seems to be lacking in very active, good faith conservatives. So, I mean, I feel like that's a great opportunity, right? You already know the guy, the timing would be perfect, right? Since it's going to be launching sometime soon, and he's a high profile right wing name. So,
Yeah. 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 He's got me in on that. We had a really good conversation the other day. A lot about his uh destiny beatdown, if you want to call it that, and just him talking about the panel and what his plans are. So yeah, I'm pretty excited to kind of get involved with that. And I think there's a problem right now, and the problem is that there aren't enough people that are on the center right that there are to debate. Yeah, you have the sneakos, you have the red pill movement, but they're not really. I don't want to say they're bad faith, but they're not. They're a little further right than I would probably be on a lot of things. Um, and it's not the atmosphere that I would probably fit into most. And I don't think there's anybody who is the destiny of the right or the ruminate of the right that's even really active right now, especially in the Twitch sphere. And whether you want to blame that on lefties themselves, or you want to blame that on censorship, or you want to blame that just on conservatives being lazy, whatever it is. The fact of the matter is it doesn't exist, and maybe I could fill that void a little bit.
especially since you don't, it would be purely voluntary, right? It's not like you would have to do it. It's not like feast or famine. You know what I mean? Like you've got the I don't know about the time, especially if if you have 2 kids, but you certainly have
Definitely
the
don't have the
disposable
time.
income, right? Right. Like you've got you can actually make this a labor of love as opposed to taking shortcuts because your financial health depends on it, right?
Sure. I
So
mean, but with
yeah.
that said, though, I still don't want to get banned off everything. So you know what I mean. So we'll see how far it goes, and I think if anything, if something like that does happen, maybe I can be a testament to just how strict this has gotten versus conservative opinions because and this might be our first disagreement. I do think there is a pretty significant bias, at least on Twitch, when it comes to anything that opposes pretty much left wing orthodoxy, and that is including positions and opinions that I hold. Like I am not anti-vax, but I do think that there is um, egregious policies in reference to even discussing anything that is in opposition to mainstream. Hey, get the poke, right? So
Okay.
that's my
Do you
2 cents.
mind if I take notes as we do this, by the way? Like if you hear me typing, just so I don't like, lose track of what you're saying. If there's something I want to respond to, you cool with that?
Nah, do you think? Yeah, of course.
Perfect. So then yeah, if you kind of want to recap the beginnings of our disagreement or really of our interaction, because I think it was in the YouTube comment section was really when it started.
Yeah. So I'll just give you a quick background on myself that what hasn't already been said. So ideologically, I probably put myself center right. Um, One of the most important issues that I feel or that I have, I'm more of I would say probably an issue voter, and I just see myself aligning presently mostly with the new wave of Republican thinking. Um, However, I hate the Republican Party, so we probably have a lot of agreement there. I think that they're a disaster. I think that they're old. They're ignorant. They're not with the times. Outside of maybe two or three from the RNC. However, the most important thing I think that faces this country right now is immigration. The Democrat came out tomorrow and was as far left as you can imagine, except for one position, and he believed that immigration or talked about immigration being a real issue and it needed to be addressed. I'd vote for him in a second. So that's really where I am now. In terms of like overall, I put myself probably on the right because of other values too, right? Like I do believe in the nuclear family. I am pretty traditional when it comes to the roles of man and women, right? Like, so I'm not a fundamentalist Christian or anything like that, but I do like these values. So that's just kind of where I am ideologically. But I don't want you to think that I have any allegiance to a particular party or position. I can be moved off anything. The only thing I really can't be moved off of, which is why I mentioned it, is immigration. And for a couple of reasons, primarily because of what I've lived through and what I've been through. And that kind of leads me into like the first kind of disagreement that I think I had with you in the channel, which was I feel like, and including people like Destiny, who I think is probably the lesser of many evils. I think the problem that faces the online sphere right now, especially when talking about these topics, is people are completely detached from how real people think. It just seems like no one has any street smarts. And I use that like I'm using that purposely, street smarts, because I think a lot of this stuff transcends anecdotes, and it really comes down to what have you lived through, what have you seen, and you know the expression, "I know a guy who knows a guy." It's funny, but a lot comes from that. Like I was born and raised in Brooklyn, New York. I've seen a lot of stuff growing up. Um, between I used to work at a pharmacy that was between two mafia families, right? Just kind of growing up in that atmosphere, and then later in life, kind of seeing how that neighborhood changes, and then still knowing people that are from that neighborhood that tells you things, and you see things that no, you're not going to see a study on, and no, you're not going to really hear about, but you're going to see it. And I'll give you two perfect examples. I had two friends who were offered by hospitals $9,000 to allow them to put COVID on the death certificate. Straight up, just offered $9,000. Family relative died. They said, "Can we put COVID on here? We'll give you $9,000." And these are things like you just don't hear unless you know people. Another thing is just knowing a lot of Guatemalans who came over, working with a lot of Guatemalans, seeing how my neighborhood transformed. This idea that immigrant, I know I'm bouncing between topics, but this idea that immigrants don't receive coverage or Medicare, or they don't understand, or they don't know, oh, who's going to make a marriage decision, someone like Destiny says, based on Medicare or Medicaid or subsidies. That can't be furthest from the truth. When they come here, they know exactly what to do. Their family and culture directs them exactly where to go and where to get every single subsidy, how to take advantage of all the programs. There's NGOs and there's hotel floors full of attorneys on how to put together documents so they could go in front of a judge and get the max amount. My old barber, who was a Guatemalan, had 9 baby mamas. You ask him why, he tells you government check. Moroccan barber who also worked there was also a friend of mine. Ask him, why did you come to America? It's very easy to make it here. Government just give you money. I mean, this is the culture. Like, and if you see this and you know this, and you actually speak to a person, speak to an immigrant instead of looking at pictures of them, you understand these things, you know, because they tell you. They're not hiding it. And a reason being is because they're no happier about what's going on than someone like I am is. They say they came to America to live with Americans. They didn't come here to live where they fled. And if you talk to anybody, any illegal or legal immigrant, they'll tell you just what goes on over there is atrocious. Well, first of all, one of the biggest misleading things is that we have Mexican immigrant problem. A lot of immigrants coming from Mexico. It we don't really have an immigration issue from Mexico. It's really from Guatemala. So they pass through Mexico to come here. And that's one of, and if you talk to a Guatemalan and you tell him he's Mexican, he's going to get mad at you because Guatemalans and Mexicans, they don't like each other, right? So it's just like little things like that, like just having these community these talks with people, you really get to understand just the problems that are facing communities. And I feel like that aspect is really, really missing, and you really see it come to light when people get into these arguments. And one of those arguments you were in was the anti-vax, or those discussions you were trying to talk about people who were anti-vax and who are on the right. And you all were debating and deliberating on, oh, they must follow Trump or think Trump is some amazing God and they follow him. And it just was so unrealistic to me, because when you actually speak to people or know people, no one really thinks in the paradigm of left or right. Immigrants, family members, anti-vaxxers, whatever. They don't really talk like, "Oh, I'm an anti-vaxxer." It's usually a lot simpler than that, right? They just like, "Ah, I don't want to put something else in my body. I don't want to deal with it. I don't want to talk about it. I just don't want to go," you know? So I feel like just, melding those two conversations together or those 2 points of contention, whenever I hear people talking about it, it just to me seems like, have you ever really gone outside? Like talk to somebody because you learn a lot. So sorry if that was a bit long-winded, but yeah, that's kind of where I'm at.
No, I mean, we'll probably have to break some of these down like into
Yeah, for
their
sure.
constituent parts, but let me reciprocate here because for the first thing you did, and I appreciate that, was give me a little bit of your ideological background, like where your general stances are, what your major issues are as a as a voter, as a political creature, and then you got into specifics about issues with Destiny and I in terms of our conversations, which I do appreciate, and I took notes on all of these. So we just reciprocate a bit. Um, I it, Sometimes it's very hard for me to identify exactly where I am on the political spectrum. Certainly, I am left of center. There's no question about it. But I go
Well,
back and forth.
looking at your
Yeah,
YouTube shorts, I don't know, man.
yeah,
A lot
I
of
know
light there,
exactly.
huh?
I mean, it's so ambiguous. But in terms
Yeah.
of like when people look for like a particular title, when they're like, "Are you a democratic socialist? Are you a social democrat? Are you progressive? Are you, a neoliberal?" And the thing that I go back to the most is the thing that I can easily identify about myself is I'm anti-Republican in its current iteration. That is the most consistent aspect of my political advocacy in 2022, 2023, and for
That
the
really
foreseeable
a
future.
Is that really a political position though? Anti-Republican?
It
That's like
it
saying I'm
it
anti-Trump.
is. It is, and that's what I was gonna get into. So
Sure.
there are, in terms of aspiration, in terms of what I'd like to see, probably social democrat, or probably I would consider myself a sock dem, mostly.
Can you give me your definition of a sock dem?
Yeah, so basically, I want I don't want to abolish the capitalist system. I understand that things work, the private business and the private sector has a role to play. But I also think that the government, I would argue, is the single most important market player, the player in the market, not only to enforce contracts, but also
The
to curtail.
equalizer.
Yes, kinda, but mostly to curtail the worst excesses of the private sector. So I believe in weaponizing the profit motive, but I don't think that anybody or any business is entitled to pursue profit at the expense of civilization. So you take something like climate change. A company doesn't have a right, in my opinion, and I think the law should reflect this, to rape the planet for the sake of their profit motives. At the end of the day, the functioning of society is infinitely more important than a billionaire becoming a multi-billionaire. So at the end of the day, if I'm put in a position where I have to squeeze,
What do you do though when in just because I want to take these point by point, what do you do then when those positions are used to make profit? So, for example, you have a company, or like we see with the whole climate crisis, where people are but literally buying and trading emissions and making a fortune off of either selling or buying emissions, and it becomes a whole trade and becomes a billion-dollar industry in itself.
that's a problem. I don't think, I mean, again, morally, I don't think you should be able to take your oh, what's the expression, like your carbon allowance or whatever, and sell it to somebody else. Like,
Sure.
so in terms of, if your question though is broadly speaking, do I think people should be able to make money off of bettering the planet, like pursuing renewable resources or green energy or whatever? Absolutely. Again, I think the profit motive should be weaponized and incentivized wherever possible. But if there's ever a situation where it's like, look, I have a fiduciary duty to maximize my profits, and if that means melting the polar ice caps, so be it. Then I think the government has a duty to go, no, and we'll take your money from you if you try. I think the government has a moral obligation to, at the end of the day, be the looming threat over the private sector. Since on paper, the government is supposed to be the representative of we the people, and we can get into whether or not on a functional level that that's the case. But since the government on paper is supposed to be the most linear reflection of society's wills and wishes and protections,
Mhm.
government should have the power to check businesses.
which they aren't
So
doing enough of. I mean, monopoly laws are just not enforced.
no, they're
Which
not. Antitrust and monopoly laws. I mean, but also I would argue, and this is why I would say I'm anti-Republican, and certainly not because Democrats are beyond this. It's just that I recognize that there's a distinction between the two. I recognize that their two bad choices are not inherently equally bad, right? So Democrats are the lesser of the two evils in terms of
do you really
gutting.
see do you really see that though? I mean, what are they? I mean, a lot of what you're saying, these profit motives, and so be it, XYZ. I want to make profit for my company. A lot of that stems from CEO churn, right? So a lot of these big companies, they use the same, uh, 20 or so CEOs, and they all cycle through companies, and all these CEOs care about is maximizing their profits. So when they leave that company, it looks like they did X, Y, and Z, and then they use that as a platform for their next CEO engagement. What exactly are Democrats doing to fix any of that, though?
Well, I would argue that the first thing that they do is both in terms of how they message and the policies that both moderate and progressive Democrats call for, like including President Biden when he's proposing increasing taxes on corporations. And you might have your issues with the corporate tax rate. You might say that it's inefficient, that there are better ways to extract tax from people to fund social programs. And I'm sympathetic to that. But the idea of we're going to put more of a burden on businesses and successful businesses at that, and the wealthiest in this country, even just signaling in that direction is an improvement, or is preferential to what Republicans do, because Republicans take the opposite approach, where rhetorically and in terms of policy, they tend to be pretty lax on businesses. They say that if you tax big business, if you
Oh, I agree.
tax wealthy, you are
Yeah.
punishing them for their success. So even if I grant you that,
Hang on though. So a sec. But isn't the general idea though, that so if you increase tax rates, I mean, I think from my understanding, the general argument is if you increase tax rates, all that's going to do is incentivize those big businesses to go outside the country where there are going to be less regulation on carbon emissions. Whereas if you lower the tax rate or you incentivize big business to actually manufacture in the country, they're going to be subject to particular environmental regulation here in the United States that they're not going to be subject to in a country like India, or China, right? So wouldn't it be more beneficial not to scare them
no,
out of
I
that
I
idea?
no, well, I think what it is it's the notion of trickle down economics, which no economist takes seriously. It's been the case. I mean,
Who
that
who's really still talking about trickle down economics though?
well, that's
Besides
that that's ultimately
Trump.
that's ultimately what you're talking about, the idea that you shouldn't tax, that the idea that you shouldn't tax, have a progressive tax on big business and on the wealthy, because that actually disincentivizes domestic business. It actually discourages people from paying their employees better. It
No,
because
no, no,
it,
no. That's not what I'm saying. No, 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 I'm not saying. So when you talk about trickle down economics, Reagan's philosophy, I understand all about it. What I'm talking about is not paying workers more, but just incentivizing manufacturing to be in the United States as opposed to outside the country. Subjecting them to regulation that is more beneficial to the environment, which they're not subject to in other countries. Do you
I
really think
don't
that falls within trickle down economics?
I don't know in terms of, we're going from, I think we're kind of blurring two lines. Are you
Okay.
referring to
Sure.
EPA regulation, or are you talking about increased taxes?
Well, I'm
Because if you're
saying, so if you're so what I'm saying is, and I've heard this argument at least from some people on the right, where if you increase the tax rate, you're going to just force companies like Apple and whatever to continue or to increase manufacturing outside of the United States,
where they can get cheaper labor.
where
Yeah.
they where they would pay less taxes, and on that labor. And then if you do, because how else are you going to tax them if not on manufacturing and labor? What are you just going to charge them just to have a corporate office in the United States? Well, fine, we'll move our corporate office to another country too. You know what I mean? So my point is that my argument rather is that if you keep on increasing taxes or you make it less encouraging to be here in this country and manufacture in this country, they're going to go to another country like China or India where they don't have as strict regulation on the environment or EPA standards, and they're just going to continue to pollute the environment. So I just don't see how that is necessarily conducive with a pro-environmental philosophy, at least in terms of increasing taxes, if that makes
I
sense.
I'm not aware. I'm not aware of any evidence that the idea that we're driving companies away by increasing tax rate. Because you look at like right now, we are experiencing greater levels of domestic manufacturing under President Biden than we
Right.
did under President Trump, who was a conservative, reduce taxes on business politician.
Yeah, Build Back Better. But the Build Back Better, I mean,
What you cut out on me? Crooked. You're not moving. So are you
hold on.
there?
Hold on. Yeah,
Yeah.
everything just kind of refreshed. Um, so, yeah, you're talking about Biden's Build Back Better, and to Biden's credit, I agree with you completely. I think it's been great what he's been doing in reference to bringing some of that back here, but a lot of that stemmed from at least the positive feedback that Trump got in reference to seeing the American people want more from manufacturing brought back to this country. And I think that if you actually look at Build Back Better, um, there it, there is incentives there, not that aren't conducive to increased tax rates. You follow what I'm saying? Like
Well,
antithetical to that. Yeah.
a couple of things. It's a multi-pronged approach. Number one, I wouldn't give any credit. I see no reason to give any credit to President Trump because President Trump wasn't the one who came up with the idea that, hey, Americans want more domestic manufacturing. That's been the case for decades. And actually, as a matter of fact, the reason that we see less and less domestic manufacturing is because, again, of a conservative for-profit motive where like, hey, look, I can get cheaper labor elsewhere and expand my profit margins elsewhere. So I'll offshore my business. That's a conservative notion, right? So conservative philosophy led companies to offshore their industry. The American people suffered as a result because they need to be gainfully employed. They wanted manufacturing back. Conservatives failed to get it back, one conservative administration after another. Now we have a Democrat in charge, and he has, number one, a pro-manufacturing, pro-union background, and he also wants to tax businesses at a higher rate than Republicans as well. And he's attempting to do both. So he's doing both simultaneously. Yes, he wants to tax businesses more and close loopholes for businesses to, avoid paying
I
their
mean,
taxes.
I mean,
And he's also
yeah,
he's
go ahead.
also providing incentives for them to come back as well. It's carrot and stick. But Democrats are better at it.
Sure, and I mean, don't get me wrong. Like I said, I have no allegiance to the Republican Party. Really couldn't give two shits. I think they're horrible. But in terms of leadership, Democrat leadership leading to what you were stating in reference to manufacturing in the country and conservative ideas being to incentivize overseas work. I mean, we've also seen a lot of negative come from the Democrat Party too. I mean, we saw a lot of bailouts for banks. We saw a lot of um go ahead. You know, I don't want to keep it. Go ahead. Continue what you're saying.
Well, no. So, and I mean, again, we can get into that. But as far as like
I don't want to get
getting
too argumentative, about because now you know what it is. I don't want to start like making it seem like I'm defending Republicans or conservatives. There's a lot of truth to what you're saying.
I take you at
Yeah,
face value when you say that you're not a cookie cutter Republican defender. I will let you know if I ever think like, okay, Crooked, come on, for a guy who says that he's not a Republican shill, you sure do a hell of an impression of one. So, and I appreciate you trying to be sensitive to that, but I take you at face value. But getting back to like my overall, like where I am ideologically,
right.
my most consistent philosophical point at this point is that I'm anti-Republican because I think the Republican Party is the greatest threat to the United States politically, and through the United States. I'm sorry, I drink an energy drink, so like indigestion, and through the United States, the planet. In terms of just overall policy, I would just like to see the country move left. I'm unfortunately one of those privileged fucks who will take whatever he can get in terms of like progressive politics. That's why even though Biden wasn't my first choice during the primary, I've become a Biden stan because he is the leader of the Democratic Party. He is, the foremost opposition to the Republican Party at this point. So I feel like I've got a moral and intellectual prerogative to shore up his many accomplishments, especially against conservatives. But in terms of my preference, I liked Bernie Sanders, Pete Buttigieg. I liked two or three people in the Democratic primary more than Biden who were left of Biden. But I'll also say that in large part because of the people Biden surrounded himself with after he got the nomination and then won the presidency, he's governed much more progressively than I expected him to. His rhetoric, I feel like, is sometimes too moderate, too both sidesy, too, my Republican friends, yada yada. But he's governed much more progressively than I expected. So unfortunately, like I'm one of those people that, yes, like my mother died of lung cancer 4 years ago, had to watch her die.
Sorry for your loss.
I appreciate that, man. Watching that really opened my eyes on what I think of healthcare in this country, because I am one of those people who does think that we're brought into this world against our will, right? We are birthed into this world. We're not without our consent. We're here. And this is, in my view, this is what we get. This is the existence we get. And we have an obligation, I think, to try to keep our citizens alive, especially if we can afford to do it, right? We're the wealthiest country in the history of civilization. So just on a broad conceptual level, I do support Medicare for all. I do support healthcare for all. I think that if you want elective surgeries or things like that, then yeah, that's something that should come from like either an insurance company or you should have to pay for it. But in terms of just your overall health, I don't think a person should ever have to go bankrupt to keep themselves alive or to undergo major necessary medical procedures. I just don't think that that should be a thing. I don't think that should have to be a consideration. So, how we go about that? Well, I'm open to all kinds of options there because I'm less committed on the procedure than I am getting as close to the outcome as possible.
So,
So just as an example, just to let you know where my brain works, if somebody says, "Hey, I can't get you Medicare for all, but I can do a Pete Buttigieg Medicare for all who want it," where there's a public option, but if you're happy with your private insurer, you can keep it. A lot of progressives didn't like that at all. No, 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 that's unacceptable. We need to go all the way. But if Medicare for all who want it could be obtainable, fuck yes. Excuse yeah, I will let's go with that because that's better than what we currently have. Same thing with the ACA. Obamacare has had a gazillion flaws, fewer now than it did at the time of its passage, but that was still a step in the right direction, in my opinion. So when you ask, okay, what are your political views? Just basically as much progress as we can get. If we can get more, take it. If I can't get more and I have to take what's on the table, I'll take that too. I'm just not the sort of person to turn down any sort of movement leftward out of spite, unlike a lot of progressives. Just to kind of give you some background about how my brain works.
I understand that the only contention I would really have with that is probably what your idea of progress. I mean, are you open to reconsidering some of your philosophies?
Yeah, if someone
Especially
could
those.
persuade if someone could persuade me that a view that I have is actually regressive and not progress, absolutely. What
So just to kind of name one of those. So a- in terms of both healthcare and the environment, how can you support or be so anti Republican, as you say, or be so pro progressive or pro Democrat when the unfettered mass immigration that we undoubtedly and objectively and unequivocally have an issue with in this country is at emergency levels for both of those things? How do you contend with that? For example, Obamacare. Have you ever gone, in, especially in the inner city? Where are you from? Where do you live?
I live in North Carolina.
North Carolina. Okay, so it's a little tough to kind of put this in perspective for you, but in New York City, you go into any. I have great insurance through my employer,
Hmm.
so I have a PPO, so that means I could see any doctor. I could see the doctors that take my insurance, and a lot of the doctors that take my insurance take Empire, take PPOs. Well, not PPOs means you could go to any doctor, but take like Empire, take like the insurances that are usually the ones you pay for. They usually don't take Medicaid. They usually don't take government insurance. And the reason for that being is, I mean, if you walk into any emergency room or any doctor facility, that takes Medicaid, Obamacare, whatever, they are packed. And I mean, I had to go because before I had this insurance, I had um a problem downstairs. Let's just call it that. I thought I did. I got a little overzealous, right? Got a little too nervous about it. I had to wait 3.5 hours just to get looked at. You know what I mean? And that's because that office was jammed, and it was jammed with immigrants. Um, first generation immigrants. So how do you contend with those philosophies where progress is I don't want to say you're for open borders, but progress is allowing people to come into the country when we're swearing in 1 million a year, 40,000 a day are coming in illegally, and we have the highest under Biden, the highest rate of immigrants coming in, illegal immigrants coming into this country we've ever seen, and we're talking about 70 to 80 million people in just one generation due to birthright citizenship.
Well,
This is not sustainable under any medical program. So
well,
I don't. Yeah, go ahead.
Well, number one, I just to clarify, I don't support open borders. I do think that every nation has a prerogative and an obligation to define some sort of border progress. We haven't had open borders in the United States for effectively for like 150 years. I mean, there's been a robust procedure on paper for most or at least half of our existence as a state. And I think we have every moral and legal and practical obligation to do that. Now, for me, the question is, in terms of President Biden, I would want to know what policies President Biden has instituted, or what he no longer enforces exactly, that you believe has caused this influx. Now, I agree with you that border contacts are higher than ever. We also have record arrests from President Biden's Department of Homeland Security. You know, like they're making contact. We have record drug seizures, record arrests at the border. So, as far as I can tell, while it is true that there are more immigrant contacts at the border under Biden, it's not like law enforcement at the border is lax. You know, they are making record arrests, record drug seizures. So I would just need to know.
Because you have record people coming in.
Sure,
So that's
but
you know,
what I would right, but what I'm
yeah.
saying
I mean,
is,
if you have 10 times the people coming in and you have 5 times the arrests, it's what a
well,
big deal.
Well, no, but what I mean is, if it were like the conservative pitch and the Republican pitch is that Biden wants and has effectively created open borders.
It's not my
It's true.
pitch, though. It's not my pitch.
I understand, but you did ask, okay, under Biden, this is going on. Well, my first question is, what has Biden done to create this environment if you think he's responsible for it?
No. So let me back up. So my question was, how do you contend with the Democrat philosophy or the progressive philosophy that we should allow people into this country? And again, I don't. I'm not saying you're for open borders, but you have to admit that the progressive perspective is that we should have looser borders, or we should freely allow people into this country more than being extremely strict, which I would argue is the right wing position and my position, which is we should be a lot more strict on the border. How do you contend with that philosophy or that position when it's both detrimental to the environment and our healthcare system? You
Well,
follow what I'm saying? And if you
well,
want to talk about under Biden, and just to kind of conclude that point, if you want to talk under Biden, there has been an increase, and I would say personally that the reversal of some of look, not everything Trump did was bad. There was some things that he did that were actually pretty decent, and I think the stay in Mexico policy was pretty good. It definitely, at the least, maybe it was a little tough, little rough, little inhumane, if you want to argue, but it did deter people from coming here. And that is going to be the most effective at reducing immigration, is deterring people from making that journey. And I'm sorry, Kamala Harris going on stage and saying don't come here, while it seems as if it's the promised land here by every other Democrat politician, isn't exactly doing the job. And if you want any evidence to that regard, I'll buy you dinner, man. I welcome you to come out here. We can go talk to as many as you want. They will tell you um what the temperature is back home, and the temperature is Biden is president, Democrats are in office, it's easier to get here, we should go, and that's why they're making that trip.
so my understanding is, and you know, which it's a fair question, but I just did a thing here because I wasn't prepared to talk about immigration, but I just did the Remain in Mexico policy is still in effect.
I from my understanding, Biden reversed that. Or was it stopped by the judge? I think I heard something that a
He
judge might stop
in
it.
February 2021, he tried to abolish it, but a federal judge then said that no, it had to be remain in place.
Okay.
And then the Supreme Court in August said that he had the authority to terminate it. But my understanding is,
You
even
know,
as a
yeah, good. And sorry to interrupt, but you know what my response to that's going to be, right? So my response to that is going to be, sure, but if they know, or if people that want to come here, or especially because a lot of this stuff stems from the cartels, right? They're the one that feed people information and try to incentivize them to come here because they make a lot of money. If they know the current administration is trying to reverse a policy, even just the idea of that is going to encourage them. You follow what I'm saying? Am I making sense?
I do, but it seems so. Like, here's the thing: I could buy.
Is that a little bit of a stretch? It could be a little bit of a
Yes,
reach,
it's.
you know?
I would
All
say
right.
it's a
Okay.
colossal stretch if we're going to
Fair enough.
attribute the mass influx to Biden doesn't like this policy, but he's legally required to enforce it. No, I would need to see substantial evidence that that's the either sole or primary reason why we're seeing such an influx. I think it's a multitude of factors. Number one, I imagine it was the fact that because President Trump, under President Trump's tenure, from what I remember, before COVID, there were, up until that point, record contacts at the border, at least at 1 year under Trump before COVID. Then COVID hit, and we saw a mass reduction in border crossings
Right. Yeah.
during COVID. Then, when President Biden was elected, that was when the vaccine rollout started to occur. Stay in place, stay in home orders. COVID was starting to be taken considerably less seriously. So I think that's one factor.
Mhm.
We started to take COVID less seriously. Vaccines started to become much more popular. I think Biden certainly has the perception of being much more pro-immigrant and much more friendlier towards, less hostile towards not only immigrants, but also illegal immigrants, that they will be treated more humanely if they cross illegally under President Biden than they did under President Trump. So I think it's like a multitude of factors. But
Well,
I
I
don't.
mean, ahead of the El Paso visit, I mean, Biden did say that the U.S. would allow more immigrants from Cuba, Haiti,
No, there's no
Venezuela,
question. That's what I mean. Like, there's no question that he is
and he
with.
was going to expand Title 42 as well to expel more migrants to Mexico. So I mean, there's no doubt that his philosophy is a little more pro immigration.
100%.
You know what I'm saying?
I will not challenge that for a second.
For sure.
But to me, it's a multivariate issue. It's a multivariate. It's a number of attributes that Biden had versus Trump, as well as time. I think that, again, the year or two where we saw basically no activity at the border, that was largely attributable to COVID. It was correlated with the time frame during COVID, and not anything that President Trump was doing at the time. But all that aside, as far as your question, like, okay, how can you be so anti-Republican, anti-conservative, and pro-progressive and pro all these things when
Not so much anti-conservative. I'm just saying in terms of being pro progress or pro progressive. When two of the the main talking points are inarguably pro immigration and um what was the other one? And the environmental impact, when immigration has such a negative impact on both of those things. You know what I mean? So
no, the immigration doesn't now, like anything, I would easily be open to the argument that a certain level of immigration can have a deleterious effect if it's not handled properly. But immigration in general, obviously not. As a matter of fact, because this is, like, even economically, a lot of people want to say that immigrants are a burden financially, and when every economic study with which I'm familiar says that even illegal immigrants are a net positive to the domestic economy. Immigration, pro-immigrant, morally, and as a matter of retaining talent and retaining labor, immigration is great. I think that we have a moral obligation to be pro-immigrant, and we also have, just very cynically, it's in our best interest as well. I mean, it's a trite phrase, but there's a reason that people say the United States is a nation of immigrants, and I think it's a huge reason why we've maintained our superpower status for so long.
so I'm gonna
Melting pot of
yeah,
melting
yeah,
a
go ahead.
melt a melting pot of different cultures, different talents, different perspectives. Now, having said that, like anything, and I'll go back to the beginning, I
Mhm.
don't support open borders, and I would agree that open borders and just unchecked absolute progress movement from the South American countries, or any country for that matter, into the United States would be an absolute problem. So that's how I'm able to justify it. I'm able to say, well, the reason I am pro, I'm able to be pro environment, pro healthcare, and also pro immigrant is because, like anything, I think that there are checks along the way. That there are supposed to be constraints along the way. That there's supposed to be a due process. That we have to balance our moral obligation to one another as citizens and also as people of this planet with some sort of process. So I can sit here and say at the same time that there is an issue at the southern border. I mean, we're seeing again these record contacts, these record seizures, things like that. But I don't support that. That's not. That's
Right.
not. I do think that it needs to be better than what it is,
Right.
and I.
Right.
So that's how I'm able to do it. The way things are right now with respect to immigration, I don't think any Democrat would say this is how it should be. I don't think even Bernie Sanders or people on like the far left flank would say that this is an ideal situation or that this is even acceptable, that it has to get better between state and federal governments.
I don't know. I hear a lot of even from people who I would argue are pretty logical, like Destiny, will immediately kind of pivot to you just hate brown people the second you try to bring up any immigration issues. You know what I
Well,
mean? So
yeah, well, to
I
me,
wouldn't say that progressives are largely going to agree that we have an immigration problem. I think you ask 9 out of 10 progressives, they're going to tell you, "Oh, this is great." Just like you said. I mean, we're a melting pot, and we need to
I,
bring in other cultures.
I
This
could
is
I
the one
could
that-
be
Go ahead.
I could be completely wrong, but as far as I know, I am not aware of a single quote or suggestion from AOC or Bernie Sanders or anybody, Pramila Jayapal, anybody, certainly not the more mainstream element of the Democratic Party like President Biden and so forth, who would say, or even the Secretary of Homeland Security, Alexander Mayorkas, I don't think he would say things are acceptable the way they are at the border.
Yeah.
Now, in terms of like the
Well, why
general
aren't they
principle.
doing why aren't they doing anything about it? Why aren't you increasing you said there's more arrests, but there has been no increase in border security. There has been no increase in the amount of judges or anything to kind of handle the influx. Kamala Harris won't even go down there. I mean, on one hand, you're telling me one thing, and then on the other hand, I see these things just like what we just spoke about on January 3rd, Biden going up and talking about allowing making it easier, letting more people in. And then you hear things like, we should give amnesty to the people that are already here. I mean, how do you think, or in
Absolutely. I mean,
sanctuary cities like in New York, let me just get some of this out. So in sanctuary cities like New York, I mean, they're giving out driver's license. They're allowing them to vote, illegal immigrants, allowing them to vote in some local elections. These things carry weight. These get back to families. They see this on top of the horrible, horrible legislation. Like, absolutely, we're like one of the only countries, I think, us in Canada, that even have birthright citizenship, right? Naturalization by birth. Um, None of these policies are even on the table of being looked at when it's the number two concern in the country. So I can't agree that while you tell me they believe it's serious, I can only look at actions, and actions tell me that nobody's taking this seriously. And I don't care how many Fox News segments are on of them screeching about immigration either. They didn't do a fucking thing either. I mean, they had super majority. What did they do? To me, if you ask me, the southern border should be like the Night's Watch at this point. I mean, it's absolutely
Jesus.
insane. And look, yeah,
Oh,
no,
we need to have a Game of Thrones conversation at some point now that you dropped that reference.
yeah, but the only two questions I would really
Damn.
have, and look, I'm not trying to be insensitive because I know these
You
people.
mean
I
you mean
talk
by
to them.
comparing immigrants to the to the White Walkers?
No, no, hey, no, you made that
Viral moment,
comparison.
baby. No, I'm
Yeah,
sorry. Go ahead.
no, you made that comparison. I'm just
I
saying that
did not. You said the Night's Watch. What are you talking?
I
This
said the
guy.
border
This guy over here, right here. No,
I
I'm
said
sorry. Go ahead.
I
No,
said
for
the
real.
border should be like the Night's Watch, meaning the level of security that we have at the border should be very, very strict as opposed to kind of what we have now. And if you've ever been down there, I mean, there's like sections where you can literally just like, I mean, step over. I mean, it's like a joke. It's like barbed wire, right? So it's nothing. So
So
we do have issues, but the only two, and I think we're in agreement on 95% of it. We probably disagree just on kind of like who's addressing it. But the only question I would kind of levy is two questions.
sure.
One question and one statement. My first statement would be: you said that we're a melting pot. and we're a country of immigrants, which I largely agree. The only problem that I see is that the culture of immigration has kind of changed. It has nothing to do with where people come from. Has nothing to do with the color of somebody's skin. I don't give a shit about any of that. I truly don't. My neighbor is Chinese. His son went to the military. These are great people. They said they want to live next to Italians because they hear that we take care of our property. I have tons of Mexican friends that are, you know, I don't want to dox anybody, but that are not here legally, right? So I have no issue with the people themselves. They just want a better life.
Sure.
But the culture itself, and I don't know if are you do you come from immigrants or like or have a
I
second or
mean,
third generation?
it would have to be way back.
Way
Like
back there?
my
Okay.
my ancestors are from Germany. Like
Oh,
so,
okay. So
yeah,
it's back there.
yeah. They're European immigrants.
Yeah.
So
So I come from I'm second generation, but you know, my grandparents when they came here, the philosophy was you don't take a dollar from the government. It was like a pride thing. I don't want to take any money. I came here for freedom. I want to be free. I'm gonna make something of myself here. I one of my Russian friends, he told me something I'll never forget. He came here as a legal immigrant. He said the hard part was done for you. You were born in this country. Um, you can do anything that you want to do. If you want to become a doctor, you want to become a lawyer, you could go do that. So that culture, at least from my perspective, has largely changed. So while we are a country of immigrants, I just don't see that we're the same country of immigrants that we once were, which I would argue would be a country of pioneers, settlers, people who wanted to make something of themselves and build up America. You talk to a lot of people that come here now, even on the 4th of July, you would see parks full of people celebrating and not one American flag. I think there's a whole different perspective. And the second part of that, I mean, that was just more of just kind of a statement. But my second part is really just a question to you. If you believe that we are a country of immigrants, where does the number end in terms of what we should allow in? I know you're not for open borders. Do you have like an idea of what we should limit it at?
no, no, absolutely not. I mean, I would say that to whatever extent our infrastructure and our natural resources can maintain safely, as well as the reasons for which people are moving. Because here's the other thing. This is also, I think the United States has an obligation, and this would also, number one, address a humanitarian issue, and number two, reduce the demand for people who are seeking asylum here in the United States. I think we have an obligation in terms of foreign aid to invest in our surrounding countries in order to make it, like, in order to deter people who feel like they need to flee to get a better life here, that they should be able to stay with their families, their extended families, their friends, their loved ones, their lives in their native countries if that's what they so want, without the threat of, a threat against their lives or the lives of their children. And that if they really want to come to the United States, it's not out of a necessity, it's because they want to, right? So I think that it has to be a multi-pronged approach. But in terms of an exact figure, I don't have one for you. And I don't know anybody who probably does. Maybe some number cruncher in some sort of federal agency can give you like a specific, a million immigrants or 500,000 immigrants per year based on our current infrastructure, our current tax system, our current, number of hospitals and yada, yada, all these things. But I think that it's based on what we can safely, accommodate, again, in terms of infrastructure, and based on what we can bureaucratically and legally facilitate, right? In terms of, because we want to incentivize legal and efficient border entry instead of just people, making the hazardous journey across the border illegally for many reasons. And based on,
Do you think we achieve that though by granting amnesty to those who made it here?
I think it would be absolutely, and I think most people would agree with this, regardless of whether or not that it's a good idea in terms of practicality. We don't have the means to round up how 30 million or whatever it is illegal immigrants and ship them
Oh,
back.
I'm glad you're
Yeah.
saying 30 and not 10. So that's a
Yeah.
start.
Yeah. So regardless of whether or not you think that amnesty is the morally right thing to do, because the illegal entrants broke the law to get here in the first place. I'm sympathetic to that idea that, hey, look, they got here illegally, and if laws are broken, there should be consequences for it. To me, it's a moot point, because as a matter of practicality, we don't have it would be impossible. There's absolutely no way to get that done. So we might as well. And I think a lot of Republicans, as a matter of, this is one thing that's surprising, that many Republicans and many conservatives also agree, like, at this point, we just need to call it a wash. Like, here, if you're here, here's amnesty, make sure that you get registered with a social security number and all these things. And then let's start fresh at the border. So that's how I would look at it. At a certain point, we have to be practical about things. But a couple of things, getting back to it, as far as the immigration thing, and maybe this would be better for a separate conversation. But the last thing I want to say is, I don't think it's true that the Biden administration has done nothing to address this issue. Because again, I was looking while you were talking, and like the budget request levels, the staffing levels, the requests that the Biden administration has made of Congress with respect to border security are largely commensurate with what was the case under President Trump. Title 42 remains in place. The Remain in Mexico policy remains in place. We have record contacts at the border, so it's not like they're not arresting people. And again, I can't point to a single policy that President Biden.
You know why, to me, though, that it's non-argument that he's doing as much as Trump, because to me, Trump didn't do enough, neither did the Republicans. So
Well,
what I'm going to say is it's not enough. And I mean, I
and
don't mean
fair
to
enough.
throw out- Yeah, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, fair enough. Listen, if you in good faith are saying, look, I'm not saying that this is a Biden issue. I'm saying that, right, it's a Biden issue right now because he's president, but this did not
I don't
start
think
with him.
I would just say I don't think he's doing enough. I don't think Trump did enough. I don't think the Republicans are doing enough. And when I see the ideological position of a left-wing person versus a right-wing person, at
Mhm.
least from the right, I hear, hey, this is an issue. Whereas from the left, it's kind of like,
Well, I listen. Like I said, I
you know what
think
I mean?
most.
Can you concede on that a little
Well,
bit?
no, I
Yeah.
listen. I have no problem conceding that the right, certainly, number one, is more vocal about this issue, and number two, not only are they more vocal about it, they would say that it's a bigger issue than what most people on the left would. So,
Yeah.
like I'm telling you,
Yeah.
I'm recognizing that there is an issue at the southern border, because I think that's a matter of objective reality. And as a matter of fact, in a video of mine the other day, I screwed the pooch, and I need to address this at some point, but I'm just too busy putting out so many videos in the queue. I actually called it a so-called border crisis, and that was a slip on my part. I shouldn't have done that. There is a crisis at the border. Now, the difference is we probably don't agree to the extent of that crisis. So for me, it's not a top one, top two, top three issue. To the right, it is, well, I shouldn't say it's number one, because it depends. I would argue that
Yeah.
for many Republicans, it's the number one issue when they think it's the most efficacious to hurt Biden and the Democrats. And then at other points, it's
I would
another
agree
issue.
with that, because because when they're in power, they don't do anything anyway.
Correct.
They
So
seek for their profits, and they use it to their advantage anyway.
right.
For
So
me,
I would
yeah,
so just let me say this formally. I
yeah,
would
yeah.
absolutely concede that that conservatives and that right wingers are more vocal about this issue, and they think it is a bigger issue than what most people on the left do, including myself. I recognize it's an issue. We just probably disagree strongly about how much of an issue it is relative to other issues, but I will concede that.
Hang on one sec. My daughter's
Sure.
talking to me.
No, that's fine. We'll send her a link. She can get in on this, give her opinions.
Yeah, right. Toby, do me a favor. Just go play. Yes, we can play Candyland. This is my life.
That are you a father of daughters? Is that what
Yeah.
that what it is? Oh,
Two
dude,
girls.
nice.
Sins of the past,
Yeah, that's funny. I have 4 sisters, 9 nieces, and 3 nephews.
Oh my god.
So I am a very small island of testosterone in a sea of estrogen.
There you
But I
go.
love it. It's great. It's awesome. So,
Yeah, they're daddy's little girls, so they're my princesses. When they first, you'll see when you have kids. That's all I'll say.
and again, sidebar, don't want any. Having 9 nieces and 3 nephews, I get to love them and give them back. And
Yeah,
I've been blessed with very, very good parents, and so I see it's difficult. I mean, you know,
How
they
old
made
are
it
you?
look. I'm 31.
31. Okay.
Yeah, I was able to see how difficult it was, and they made it look effortless. But I had the sort of parents that had the mindset that if we're going to be good parents, we basically, I don't want to say that they completely surrendered themselves in the sense, but we were their priority, right? So
Mhm.
like they're your kids come first. Your kids come first. They 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 come first. Emotionally, mentally, financially, physically, all these things. Like, you know, not that we ran roughshod on our parents, but that the sacrificial mindset where you just give yourself
Yeah.
for these dependents. I don't know if I'm capable of that, and I would not want to half-ass it. So
It,
until I'm fairly confident, I don't want any part of it.
the only well, I'll say two things. So the first thing is you're never ready. So if it does happen, don't get too worried. You know, I don't think anybody's prepared. But
Hmm.
I would say that there's something that happens to you biologically when you have kids
Hmm.
that, like, for me, I was like, yeah, you know, I came from a good family too. So, you know, we're very family oriented. Like I said, I got an Italian background. So I think when at first, you know, you have this idea like, man, am I going to be a good dad? You know, how can I love something? I don't even know that it exists yet. How am I going to love this thing? And it's something for men. I think it happens a little after birth, like a couple of weeks in, like, you know, once you start to see a personality developing a little bit, there's something that
Right.
just clicks inside you where it's just like, I will gladly die, like, just die if it means that my kid will be okay. Like, it's weird. Like, it's just like this weird thing that happens to you, and you just it's a wonderful thing with all the sacrifice that it entails. It really is something I feel like people should experience in their life at least
You
once.
know, it's funny you say that because again, since you know we're both Destiny watchers, somebody linked me to a thing where he said that the other day about his son, how he wasn't quite sure about this, but then when he was there at the hospital and he held his son for the first time, Destiny, who's not particularly emotional or particularly sentimental, he was like he just it clicked for him. He's like,
Yeah,
I would just die for this thing just
yeah.
right now, you know,
Let's
like
make it.
just
I think he said,
yeah,
"Let's make it work" with his wife or something like that.
right.
Yeah, something.
Right.
Yeah, even though
So
she's cheating
I
on
think there's a lot of
him.
truth to what you said, but and speaking of the destiny thing, so if we were focused, because I know your kids are awake, so you probably don't have that much longer, but and by the way, this has been extremely enjoyable, and we need to make this a regular thing, especially because my
Am I
goal
going to
will
be a
never
ruminate orbiter? And
my no, no, I'm gonna be a crooked orbiter.
yeah,
We're gonna like co-orbit each other. And the goal is here's the goal. The goal is we should each that should make it our mission to try to convert the other one.
yeah, right.
I'm
Yeah.
gonna make you a proud Democrat. Okay, I'm gonna make you such a proud Democrat, Crooked. You are the goal is like, man, I can't wait for my daughter to turn 18 so I can register her as a Democrat. That's
We'll
gonna be
see.
your
We'll see.
mindset. Yeah. So anyway, but as far as the Destiny thing, so getting back to it, your broad issue was because it wasn't just one conversation, right? I know you said it was like multiple conversations, one about like vaccines, another one about immigrants, some of which I was part of, some of which I'm not, but it was more just of a it felt like it felt like my understanding is your issue was that Destiny and I look at things from too partisan of a lens and we think that's how other people look at things. Is that right?
Not so much partisan, but just from, and I don't mean to be disrespectful. And again, I think that Destiny is pretty grounded, and he uses this argument justifiably a lot, where he feels like a lot of internet personalities just are completely detached from real life experience, and that's what causes them to think a certain way, especially when it comes to relationships and things like that. And he's largely right, but I find that even he can be pretty detached. And one thing, two things that really frustrated me, and I have some loose notes here just on kind of what happened. Um, and again, I watch a lot of his content. I have a lot of respect for him. If there's like a rare chance he watches this, I don't want him to think that I hate him or I'm being hard on him or anything like that. Like, I would love to meet the guy, have a conversation with him, right? But I would definitely.
If you've got a particular topic that you want to talk with him about, I know he'd be receptive to it. Happy to say, hey, look, talk to my buddy Crooked. We're going to convert him to being a
Yeah,
Democrat. No, so
yeah,
yeah, just let me know and I'll do what I can.
for
But go
sure.
ahead.
And there's two things that I would kind of address here that I would probably want to address with him. So
Sure.
So two examples were, let me see which order I should talk about this in, because both of them you're probably gonna have some opinions about. So
Sure.
the first thing would probably be the Twitter files. Um, Another thing would probably be his orbiters, like the perspectives that he has with someone like Erin, who I would argue is a child. I think she's a great person. She seems like really sweet. She could be a little contentious sometimes, but that's great. But some of the things that come out of her mouth are extremely immature. Like when she called Connor a hall monitor. I mean, that was probably one of the most disgusting things I've heard somebody say to someone. And just to kind of put that in perspective, my cousin was on the NYPD force for what, 2.5 years before he was picking up bodies at ground zero. I mean, imagine Aaron calling someone like that a hole monitor because he was on the job for 2 years. I mean,
Yeah.
to me, it's just like, dude, what do you're on, the only grass you see is your college campus. You know what I mean? Like, you got to chill. So that was just, and I just don't see any pushback with people like her from him, which kind of frustrates me. Um, Unless he's negging her and flirting with her, which is just like, dude, come on, man. Like, let's be real. So that's one thing that'll kind of trigger me a little bit about him.
Okay.
And his take on small businesses was a little bad, but also the Twitter files. So I kind of have a little bit of a gotcha for him. So hopefully he doesn't see this because I kind of want to use it against him.
Well,
So
well, then I would recommend you holster it.
yeah, I'll
Then,
holster it
okay,
then,
you
because
you holster.
maybe I'll private message it to you. So
Yeah, you holster that. So it's broadly the Twitter files, and then
well, just the
some
way
of his
he kind of
orbiters.
approached it, yeah, and the way he kind of treated, and the whole thing with Connor to me was this idea that he has to be tougher on conservatives because his chat said so, or whatever position he has to be meaner, quote unquote, to conservatives. When from what I've seen from a viewer looking in, it's only been conservatives and maybe people like you or ABBA who have actually treated him with some level of dignity and respect. I mean, I think he even said it the second the cameras went off at Fresh and Fit. Everybody was just like, there was never a disagreement. It was drinks and laughter. And I mean,
Wait, I'm
well,
sorry. Treated him with dignity. You're talking about Destiny or Connor?
I'm talking about
Okay.
Destiny. So Destiny has this thing where he's got to be meaner to conservatives or meaner to people on the right. And I think he used Connor as a punching bag when Connor and people like Connor, Lauren Southern, people from Fresh and Fit, Sneeko, they all treated him with far more dignity and respect and like a friend than anybody from the left has.
E-
And to in my opinion, to kinda say, "Oh, well, I gotta be meaner to these people." Why? Because I mean, as someone who always talks about not being so ideological and being more fact-based, why do you have to be meaner to conservatives? That to me just kind of felt, a little underhanded. And when I was watching that conversation with Connor and that beatdown, and then the talks about anti-vaxxers, it just felt to me very detached from how people think and from the way relationships should be, which I wouldn't normally have any issue with, but he preaches so much about that, where to me it's kind of like, well, dude, do you see what you're doing or how you're acting? You know what I mean? Like, it's yeah,
Yeah.
that's
So
all.
so no no so no. I think you touched on a lot there. Let me say this a couple of things. As far as let's stress the Connor thing first. So, which I know you didn't say this about me, but just for the record, right? I was very nice to Connor. Connor and I were very civil to one another. It was very respectful, and I tried to stay on point. That's why, like at one point, everybody laughed at me because after they were going back and forth, you're a hall monitor, you're a bitch, blah blah blah. Finally, I was just like, so Connor, just to recap, and I would like to bring it back because I was trying, and even Destiny's like,
Right,
"Dude, what are
right.
you doing?" I'm like, "Damn it, I'm gonna get this back on track." And listen, here's what I'll say, and this is my challenge. I thought what Aaron said and what Cherry said was funny, but it was very harsh. Here's the thing: I have an irreverent sense of humor. I know sometimes it doesn't come off that way because I try to be very like polite and drama free. But it's really hard to make a joke that shocks me, as I'm sure it's the case with you. I've even joked about my own mother's passing, and it's not something that I find joy in, but I process things through humor. That's how I
I
do it.
like the spice too, though. I
Well,
have
well,
nothing against the spice. It was just it was something that needed pushback on, and Destiny just let that fly, and it was just so like
What? Well,
you're
so
like my response to her would literally be like, dude, you're an infant where you have absolutely zero real world experience, and you're telling someone who was a cop for 4 years that he was a hall monitor. What have you done? I don't know. It's
yeah.
just like it just was it was, and I hear a lot of stuff from her that are kind of along that path where she speaks from, like, for example, her sit down with Destiny during the Change My Mind the whole time, at least to me, was glaringly obvious she was fishing for, well, woke is a catch-all. And it just yeah, and
Well, and so we have different
you
views
know?
on that because
Yeah,
it's funny when I remember watching that video, or it was playing on the background because I work from home. So I listened to like a lot of, again, David Packman, Brian Tyler Cohen, Sam Cedar, Destiny Vosh, all these people, Chris Wallace. I get a lot of my news and commentary while I'm working in the background. And I remember that conversation with Destiny. And I actually, for the most part, I was really impressed because this is an issue that Destiny and I have disagreed with in private as well, because I think that I think he's completely wrong. And we could probably get into that at a separate time, but I think he's completely wrong about the woke orthodoxy thing. Cause when we have thousands of campuses
that's
in
gonna
the
have to be
United,
a separate discussion because
yeah, on the
I'm gonna
United
disagree with
in the
you.
United sure, in the United States, when we have thousands of campuses and you can only cite me 5 or 10 examples of a professor getting pressure or whatever, damn it, the biologist guy, now I'm blanking on his name, not Sam Harris, but you know who I'm talking about. Brett Weinstein.
Brian
You
Weinstein
need
and
you
his
need to
brother
be
Eric
bringing
Weinstein.
you're going to have to bring about 100 of those for me to even be open to the idea. I think he overstates it. I think he dramatically overstates.
Well, I mean, just to kind of sidebar a minute. I mean, Bill O'Reilly was talking about wokeness on college campuses and it being an issue at 15 to 20 years ago. So I mean,
Yeah, but
this
I don't
has
think
been
that that's
going on for a long time. Yeah.
yeah, but I don't think the fact that a well established conservative mouthpiece talking about this, Bill O'Reilly, 20 years ago, I don't think that that's necessarily proof of that, because I think Bill O'Reilly would be saying that if at any point he confronts a
Well,
liberal opinion that disagrees with him.
it's at least evidence that it's escalated, right? So if there's evidence that this existed 15, 20 years ago and everybody was scoffing and laughing about it, and now it's
So
so
no,
known that
actually,
even my boomer parents know about it. I mean,
well, no. See, that's the thing. I don't think that that's sufficient evidence of it. I think it could be evidence of it, but
okay.
then you would need to bring the receipts, because basically what you're saying is, hey, look, these people are murmuring and gasping. It must be proof of a fire. It may not be. It may be proof of
Well, let me
something else
ask you this.
entirely.
Let me ask you this then. So, first of all, we'd probably, if we would have had this discussion, which we don't really have to have it now, but I would ask you to define too far. So, in my
Well, no,
opinion,
I would have to have you do that, because that's the positive claim. It's conservatives saying that wokeness has gone too far. I would need proof that it has. You can cite specific examples, and I may agree or disagree that this is
okay,
so, like, for example, and this wasn't a college issue, but do you remember the case of that one girl who was going into college like a year or two ago, and like when she was a freshman in high school, somebody caught her on Snapchat saying the N word when she was rapping a lyric, and then
yes,
somebody
yeah,
sat on that tweet. That's an example
okay.
of wokeness going entirely too far. That was just cruel that
Well,
you weaponized that
well,
three.
that's kind of what I mean, right? Like, yeah, I know, I get what you're saying. Like, I'm making the positive claim, but the only reason I would want to kind of catch your threshold is because my example of wokeness going too far may not be your threshold. So, for example,
Sure, sure.
in my opinion, someone doesn't need to be canceled off college campus for it to go too far for me. It's like, so just to give you an example, my good friend is a coach for his son's little league football team.
Okay.
He's not allowed to refer to the team as the boys because they haven't chosen their gender identity yet.
Okay.
And they're 9. So to me, nobody's getting canceled. Nobody's being kicked off campus. Nobody's being fired for voicing a different opinion. But to me, that's an example of wokeness going too far. You follow
And
what
I
I'm saying?
think that you could easily make the case for that, especially since, boys and guys, whatever, can be such a non-gendered phrase. Like, how you can look at a
Yeah,
group of guys and girls and go, hey guys, how's it going? And you're not
right.
actually meaning people with penises or people who identify as boys as a gender role. It's just a generic catch-all. Completely understand that. Totally sympathetic for it. You and I could probably agree on 10,000 different instances. what I would simply say though is, number one, how big of a deal is that in the grand scheme of things? Number two, how frequent is that deal? If you want to say, look, this particular instance is annoying, it's a problem, and it
Well,
shouldn't,
I
and
think
it, well, hang on, and
sure.
it shouldn't become more common than what it is, we would probably completely agree.
Okay.
But if you're one of those conservatives who are like, oh my God, this is apocalyptic, this is the end of the world, no, like, no, we would absolutely not
No,
agree.
but I
And
think
so,
but I think there's something to be said about, well, first of all, I don't believe slippery slope is fallacy. I believe that it is true. I believe that if you don't voice enough objection to some of these things, they will escalate. And I think there is something to be said about the Department of Education, which is a government entity, um, implementing policy that seems to provoke or incentivize left wing orthodoxy, such as pronoun implementation, not using gender inclusive language like guys or the boys, right?
so
And just as a sidebar to that, I mean, if we are for the abolition of gendered language or genders in general, I think it's the most left wing position to be like, hey, we should be saying hey guys because it's so gender neutral, right? Like it's completely abolishing the idea of
well,
men and women when you say something like that. So,
well,
but
number one, I don't know how much or and how popular gender abolition is. Like, I know Vosh is a fan of it. I've not committed to it as far as I know. Destiny
well,
hasn't either. I well, but here's my thing.
wait, gender inclusivity. So what I'm saying is like if the position is to be super gender inclusive or for there to be less delineation between men and women, then having something that is universally gender exclusive inclusive, like hey guys, to me would be a great left wing left
Well,
wing.
well, here's
Yeah.
the thing. I
Yeah.
personally think it's because you got to understand. I grew up in the South in a red state. I lived in Kentucky most of my life, and then moved to North Carolina recently. So I've only ever lived in red states. So, hey guys, and growing up in a rural red state, I mean, there were no trans people of which I'm aware that I went to school with. So a lot of the parlance was tailored accordingly to basically mostly cis straight people whose sex and gender in 90 to 99% of the time were in sync, right? So hey guys was gender inclusive, excuse me, in rural Kentucky when we used it. Now language evolves over time. So I'm not making the commitment that look, I'm saying objectively in every situation, in every place, at any given time, all 50 states, that guys is going to be objectively determined to be gender inclusive. I understand how some people, how a trans person might find it uncomfortable or offensive because on paper, guys refers to boys, refers to males, whatever. We just in a lot of places, it's gender inclusive. So I'm not even getting into that. I'm saying I personally agree with you. But as far as like the going back to the Department of Education, you know, inculcating some sort of like progressive orthodoxy, didn't they do that when during integration? Like progressive orthodoxy, like, so society has norms and mores that makes its way into education policy and government policy. When we forced schools to integrate, that was progressive orthodoxy. That was opposed by conservatives, not and championed by progressives. Progressives wanted to integrate and say, no, you can't treat black people differently. You have to have them in the same school. You have to educate them the same way. You have to address them the same way, or you're going to get fired. That was progressive orthodoxy. I assume you would support that, right?
Sure.
So, is it you object to progressive orthodoxy, period, or just in this case?
I would argue that progressive orthodoxy has changed drastically.
Well, sure. But what I'm saying is, I think you would need to make the case to me that in this case, like to say it's progressive orthodoxy to me is
When
not a
I
value
mean,
judgment.
I would be I'm using progressive, I mean half colloquially because I think we all know what the modern progressive ideologue is, as opposed to what progressiveness years ago, which would be argued now as classical liberalism. I mean, what is wokeness, right? So wokeness is the idea that traditional liberalism isn't enough to fix the blights of society, and we need more. And you're woke to those additional changes or those or what is necessary. Can we agree on that?
I don't know if that's the definition at all, because what my understanding of what woke is that you are aware of various systemic iniquities and you think that society and government should play a role in addressing these
Right, because they
iniquities.
haven't been addressed through the lens of classical liberalism.
Right. And
Yeah,
so
yeah.
so and so
Yeah, we
50
agree on
years
the
ago,
definition.
and so
Yeah.
50 years ago, you would have been woke to be an integrationist, because
Fair.
50. Right. So what I'm getting at, it's not a gotcha. I'm just saying
No, no, I know. I'm saying that what I'm saying is fair, but that doesn't necessarily mean that that this version of that orthodoxy is
correct,
yeah,
correct, and so
yeah.
so that's what I was getting at. So that's why when conservatives say progressive orthodoxy, that means nothing to me, because as far as I'm concerned, for the most part, for most of American history, progressives have been right in terms of civil and social issues. When conservative, not Republicans, it was conservatives that wanted to keep slavery a practice. They were wrong. They were on the wrong side of history. It was progressives that wanted to emancipate the slaves. It was progressives who wanted to give women the right to vote. So on major social issues, the progressives have just been right. Now, if you want to make the case that, yeah,
Wasn't it majority of Republicans who voted for women's right to vote
Republicans,
in
but
Congress?
not conservatives. There was the party switch. When we're talking about conservatives, we're talking about people who wanted to maintain institutions
There
as they
was
were.
there was no party switch. Come on,
There,
Ramon.
there, there was, buddy. There was,
Stop.
there
Okay.
was,
All
there
right.
was,
Another
there,
discussion. Another
there
discussion.
was.
Yeah, yeah.
But you're conflating party with political movement. Conservatives,
I think you're over.
I'm not. Are you telling me that it was the
No, no, no.
progressive?
No. I'm not, and I'm not being critical. I'm saying I think you're putting more weight behind what I meant by like progressive orthodoxy than I probably meant. What I
Well,
mean
no, no,
was
no. I'm not. That's
okay.
what I mean. That's what I mean, though. You
Sure.
would in a conversation about this, you would have to make the case that this instance of progressive orthodoxy is wrong. Therefore, the education department and government should not be inculcating it in schools, because what I typically hear is what you said. That's what I mostly hear is
You
there
can't
shouldn't be.
wait, you can't do that though. You can't shift the positive claim to me when the action is coming from a particular group just because historically this group made what you would argue now as the right decision. You understand what I'm
I did,
saying?
but I didn't. I
Why do
didn't
I have
make.
to prove a negative just because progressives have a history or your idea
Well,
of progressives have a history of making positive choices?
no. But I didn't make the claim. You said that it was wrong. That the education department should not be encouraging progressive orthodoxy. That's a
Let's
positive.
simplify it. Let's simplify it. If you make an action and then I disagree with that action and I say that that action is going too far, why does it fall on me to explain to another individual as to why your action goes too far
But
when you
I'm
follow what I'm
not.
saying?
I didn't advocate in this conversation for the education department to do anything. I'm saying if you wanted to have that conversation, look, this is what's going on. I disagree with it. I don't think this is right.
Mhm.
You would have to, when you can't just appeal, you would, for me, for to have a productive conversation with me, you couldn't just appeal to progressive orthodoxy, because then I'll turn around and say, hey, Crooked, 9 times out of 10, progressive orthodoxy has been right. And in 9 times out of those 10 situations, you would ultimately have agreed with that too. And so you would have to say, okay, I'm talking about this particular movement. And then if you wanted me to okay, why do you support a trans inclusive or movement in education? Could try to make a case like that to you. But
Okay.
but hearing conservatives say, and again, this isn't just this is a common thing from right wing
Yeah. So
from
hey,
thought leaders.
I'm gonna interrupt you just a little bit
Sure.
because I think the where this all just stems from, as I think you're trying to prescribe opinions of mine to the boilerplate responses from conservatives. And perhaps that's my fault by using a phrase such as progressive orthodoxy. What I mean when I say that, and which was going to be the second part of my sentiment when I was voicing it, is that I believe my opinion is that I see a extremist perspective, political, cultural perspective that is mainstream. And I see that mainstream political perspective being implemented institutionally and governmentally to the detriment of what I would feel, what I value, or the values I feel that built this country culturally, and to this point, are being threatened by that extremism. And yes, I view sweeping changes to the way we are allowed to address each other based on a small percentage of the population that may or may not be trans in a school that may or may not have trans people, because of a broad policy change across the entire Department of Education. Does that make sense?
Yes, that is much better phrased than what I typically hear from conservative thought leaders when they appeal to progressive orthodoxy. Because what I'm hearing from you is you recognize that is a time and a place where it's within the purview of the Department of Education to tell traditionalists who don't want to move the needle on social progress to get fucked. We're doing it anyway, like segregation versus integration, for example. You just think that in this particular case, that it's too
It's too
too
sweeping.
sweeping
Yeah, and it's too
for
much.
right for what you think is a relatively niche issue. Now, that's a much more that is a much more consistent worldview, and one we could have a conversation about, and we should have a conversation. So we'll also put that on the immigration thing. Let's talk about
Okay,
that.
okay.
So
So a lot of
getting
things. We got a
yeah,
lot
so
of
getting
the
back to
football.
getting all the way back to Erin and Destiny. When I
Yeah.
heard that conversation, I like the fact that she challenged him on that. Like, okay, look, what do you mean by go too far? Because you're citing a couple of examples. We have thousands upon thousands upon thousands of colleges, not just teachers and instances, colleges who themselves employ hundreds upon hundreds of teachers. So we're talking about like a statistical blip that you're citing, to say that this is a big issue. What's your case? And so I like the fact that she confronted him head on in public is somebody with Destiny's pedigree.
So easy though. It's such come on, that's the easy position. Oh, show me instances. Show me hundreds of instances where this
Yeah,
is
it is
come on.
easy to
It's
demand
such a yeah.
proof of a claim.
I
Yeah, no, yeah, but that's the
have
thing.
a discussion though. Have a discussion about it, because the instances that are relevant are pretty bad.
But
And
she
if you know,
even
and my point is, wait, hang on. My point is that any amount of experience in the real world, which I would argue she is still lacking,
I think
re-
you'd be surprised, but okay.
reveals quite a bit of these issues. Well, I mean, look, she's young, she's young, so I mean, it's
This you are correct twice, sir. She is in fact young and young. I will not
yes,
dispute that.
I mean, but from what I'm hearing, from what I hear when she
You
speaks
hear a
about these
certain
issues,
naivete from
yeah,
her.
yes, that's all.
Yeah.
And again, she's probably gonna hate me for these,
No, I
my attacks
actually
on.
after listen, I'm going to try to set up a conversation with Destiny for you, but I'm also you and Aaron. You and Aaron need to step into the ring. She's
Sure.
fun to spar with. You guys would have a good time. And actually, at the very end, I think that there would be a love hate dynamic there where you would be a good foil for her. But here's what I would say on Destiny.
Do you mind if I just kind of finished
Sure, sorry, go ahead.
just that point? So when I was watching that discussion with her and Destiny, from almost the minute she sat down, I literally said to myself, on my kids, I said, she's going to say she feels woke is a catch-all. And sure enough, at the end of the discussion, her response was, I kind of feel like everybody's using wokeness as this catch-all for X, Y, and Z. And what does wokeness really mean? And I feel like that is what everybody pivots to, when really it's very easy to see what people mean when they say wokeness colloquially. And it has a lot to do with what I was talking about earlier in reference to, hey, first of all, people are getting in trouble for voicing objections to trans pronouns and things of that nature. And the second part of that is, if people are indeed afraid to speak, if there is indeed a fear, which you hear from a lot of I got a lot of friends and family who are also teachers. They are afraid, and it doesn't even come from them being leftist. A lot of these schools are afraid of lawsuits. I mean, there was one trans kid in my cousin's school who she's a principal at, and the parents who were lesbians, they were constantly up at that school saying my trans kid is not getting enough attention, and they are petrified of a media storm.
Media torrent.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, yeah.
They're afraid of the media. They're afraid of a lawsuit. And if people are scared to talk, how do you quantify that? And if you're going to deny that there is a fear there, I can understand demanding evidence, but it's going to be a difficult thing to prove unless you have some kind of experience
S-
and unless you know some people. That's all I'll
So,
say. Yeah.
sure. So again,
Sorry.
as far as the no, no, as far as the definition, I just disagree. I think that it's perfectly reasonable when you're about to have a discussion, not even a debate, like a discussion like you and I are having, just really civil discussion, to ask somebody with some degree of charitability and good faith, not, listen, I demand a dictionary tier definition, but for somebody to say, look, before we get into it, with a term like woke, which I would argue has been, it means whatever somebody wants it to mean at any given time, kind of like critical race theory. That's another one where we know for a fact that people behind the popularization of that phrase, Christopher Rufo, flat out said the goal is to pack everything into that phrase so it can be an effective messaging weapon. And the right isn't the only one to do this, by the way. Any effective political movement will weaponize speech and will distort its meaning for politically efficacious outcomes. I think it's perfectly fair to say, hey, with a phrase like woke, what exactly do you mean? Or can you clarify for me? Because I may
That's not what she did though.
well, hang on. But what I'm saying is, she is right to say it is a catch-all, because it is very often. Because, like, for example, you referred to woke just in your example, when about trans issues. Well, the Brett Weinstein thing, which was the single biggest topic discussed between Destiny and Erin, and also Destiny and President Sunday, had nothing to do with trans people. It's about black people. So that's what I mean. Like, it is a complex term, and I think it's perfectly
It's
fair
all
to say,
encompassing. It is, and it is, but it is though. I don't take issue with the claim with trying to clarify, like you said. I think that's perfect. Trying to clarify, hey, when you're talking about, well, what are you talking about? You're talking about XYZ. Okay, great. Where are these issues? Oh, you heard about this, you saw that. Great. When I have a problem is when people try to pivot to wokeness as a catch-all, as
to appeal to its ambiguity. You
right,
felt she appealed
appeal
to
and to discredit the argument that it has gone too far
right.
because, hey, woke is a catch-all and it depends on who's talking about it.
So
And
then so
yeah.
then maybe the problem was, then I'll grant you this, because it's been months since I've watched this conversation with him. Then maybe Destiny should have defined his term at the beginning, or Aaron should have asked him at the beginning what he meant, or when it was clear that they were having a catch all, one of them should have said, "Hey, what do you mean?" Or, "Okay, here, Aaron, this is what I mean."
Or he
Fair
should have
enough.
been Destiny instead of not being Destiny because she has a cute face. I mean,
So here's the other thing, okay, though,
sorry.
about the being mean thing. What's interesting is I have a completely different view of this, and this is part of what started my friendly acquaintanceship or friendship, whatever you want to call it, with Destiny, is because I actually felt, for somebody who is left wing, somebody who is liberal, somebody who is not a centrist, he was doing one hell of a job playing a both sides centristy type, and it drove me nuts, because as I feel like I've been able to persuade him, or I shouldn't even say persuade him, that's too presumptuous, as I was able to remind him repeatedly, and you can agree or disagree, but this is Destiny's opinion. Destiny will admit there is a difference, a substantive difference, between the left and the right, and between Republicans and Democrats. He will admit one is better than the other in his opinion, one is worse than the other in his opinion. And so for him to constantly rail on the left, as I feel like he does or did until here lately, that was really annoying to me, because I'm like, dude, you basically broadly agree on most things, but you are getting hung up on silly shit that doesn't matter. Whereas we have, blah 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 issue with the Republican Party, blah 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 blah, January 6th, blah 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 blah, election denialism, blah blah blah, all these things. So to me, it's like you got to triage. If you want to bitch at the left, feel free, but it needs to have a caveat, unless you believe otherwise, which he doesn't. And that was my frustration. If you don't believe that the left and right are equally bad, you should make sure it is abundantly clear to everybody that you don't believe that. So if Destiny wants to complain at Erin or Vosh or President Sunday or whatnot, I do think he owes his audience to go, hey, look, I'm going to come down hard on these fellow leftists, but I just want you to know Democrats are better than Republicans. Trump sucks, blah, blah, blah. The worst Democrat is better than the best Republican, blah, 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 and just make it clear that he's not,
he does enough of that. My point is what you just said goes against his entire philosophy of facts and logic. If you're going to go out of your way to quote unquote be mean to conservatives just to prove how left wing you are, that to me should also bother you because of
no, and here's why, because if it would only bother me, if what Destiny is doing is being dishonest to his values. If he
that is
thinks,
dishonest. If you're going to purposely go out of your way to be mean to someone just because of their
well, we don't know, that's what he
disagreement,
did. That's
that's
the
what
thing.
he's saying.
That we don't know. That's
What do you mean? That's what he's saying. He's saying, my New Year's resolution is to be meaner to conservatives." That's literally what he said. What do you mean? And then and that whole conversation with Connor, I mean, beating on him like that with 6 orbiters around you, when meanwhile you were fishing for a claim that you would never put on someone else, such as demanding that he shows you explicitly in the terms of service where it says we don't like conservatives.
well,
To me was just proof that he is quote unquote being meaner to conservatives. And
he's
you add on, hold on, and you add on the fact from what I've seen from a viewer, much more respect and dignity shown to him, especially from someone like Connor. That's and I don't want to say bad faith, but it's certainly a little against what I would think Destiny's philosophy is around conversations and disagreements. No?
so the reason that I don't think that that's contrary to his values, I would actually say that that's him returning to his values. When Destiny says his New Year's resolutions, look, I spent all of 2022 being super friendly and super charitable, and he'll even tell you this. He was super friendly and super charitable to
You're
write.
adding a lot of words that he hasn't said, though.
He has said this. He has said this when he was
Okay.
doing some of his like internet streams, like when he moved into his new apartment and he was streaming off his hotspot on his phone. He said that's part of his resolution for 2023 because I spent a lot of time being very charitable and listening to a lot of people to try to prove.
Yeah, this I heard.
Right. But hang on. Next year, I need to start pushing back more because I was too soft on people this year. Because and the reason you hear
I don't have a problem with that. I have a problem with him explicitly saying, "I'm going to be meaner to conservatives." I'll get you the link. I don't have a problem with him saying, "Hey, look,
the
guys,
reason that
I
he's
haven't been
saying
pushing
the
back."
reason that he's saying be meaner to conservatives is those are the same people that he's talking about. What he's saying is through 2022, when he was dealing with centrists and conservatives, having conversations with them, hearing them out, either guest call-ins or people like Lex Friedman or whoever else, people that he was on podcasts with, phone calls with, he was super charitable and he didn't push back. That's not what he wants to do because he knows they have bad ideas. And the reason that at one point he identified conservatives is because in Destiny's opinion, conservatives have worse ideas. They deserve more pushback. That's why he's saying in 2023, I'm going to be harder on conservatives because I actually was nicer to them in 2022. And he'll tell you, if you ask him, hey, dude, were you nicer to lefties or to conservatives in 2022? We all know he'd be like, oh, conservatives by far. Way nicer to them.
Here's what I see. Hang on. Let me explain.
Sure.
Here's what I see. He disagrees largely with a lot of this far left stuff he's been dealing with.
Sure.
Lot of these far left individuals. He was giving them the works, and I feel justifiably, because some of these people either treated him like shit, backstabbed him, would talk relentlessly negative about him on stream, and they
Yeah.
deserve everything that he gave them. As a result of that, his audience, or part of his audience, because he does have a lot of right wing followers as well, part of his audience said, "You're being too nice to conservatives," when it's understandable, in my view, because those conservatives he's being quote unquote nice to, not talking about call-ins, I'm not talking about the random podcast he might go on that he doesn't have great chemistry with, like when he went on Ralph Retort, right? talking. Oh no, not Ralph Retort. With what's his name? Who's that? The right he had the big argument with back when, but now they're pretty cool. He was on the podcast with them recently. Was it the Ralph Retort? Yeah, I think it was the Ralph Retort, right?
I'll be honest with you, I'm not sure.
Whatever the case is.
Making
Anyway,
me you're making me look like an idiot because I'm over here like I'm supposed to know that. I have no idea. But anyway, go
yeah,
ahead.
no, it's okay.
Yeah,
I didn't mean to derail that much.
yeah, no, it's fine.
So I see him justifiably, and then he has these right wingers who he vehemently disagrees with, but have treated him with a lot of respect. He has great chemistry with, like Lawrence Southern, Sneeko. He does do a significant amount of pushback on. Fresh and Fit, he does a significant amount of pushback there. He's not talking about those. He's talking about his conversations with conservatives. He feels he's too nice, that he wants to be meaner because a portion of his argument is his audience is saying you're too mean to lefties and you're not mean enough to conservatives. So I'm saying he's saying that despite of everything you're saying, that he just needs to be meaner to kind of equalize it out, despite whether it's justified or not, despite all the quote unquote pushback that you're talking about because he doesn't agree with their ideas. And he just wants to do it for the sake of evening the score. And to me, that is against what I find Destiny to be for, which is if I don't like the idea, I'm going to go push back at it. But if you have someone sitting there who's being respectful just because you disagree with them and they're having a good faith conversation with you, there is no reason to turn around and be mean to that person. But what I'm
So
hearing him say is, I'm going to be mean to them because I have to equalize. Now, if I'm wrong, I'm wrong. But that's what I heard. You follow what I'm
okay,
saying?
that's fair. So yeah, we're coming at this from two different perspectives,
And
and
that's
I'll
what I
just
saw
say,
with Connor
I'll,
because Connor's so fucking nice to him and he was beating the shit out of him live on air.
so as an olive branch, let me just say, I completely agree that it would be against Destiny's values and it would be fundamentally dishonest to be performatively
Yes,
mean
performatively, right.
to anybody because some segment of your audience is urging you to. That's the audience capture that he says he doesn't want to ever succumb to. And if he did that, if someone's like, hey, you're being too nice to Crooked, be a dick to him, yell at him, blah, 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 curse at him, and you do, that's performative, that's dishonest. I don't think I just again knowing that just doesn't strike me as who he is. I don't know where he's ever done that, where it's his audience is like, "Hey, do this," and they're like, he's like, "Yes, sir." Like because he got pushed back for the longest time from large segments of his audience based on his relationship with Sneeko and Nick Fuentes and Lauren Southern and things like that as well. So he's proven time and again that he's willing to defy large swaths of his audience.
I agree.
So I would agree with if that's what he means. Like, hey, look, it's not I don't feel like I need to push back on their ideas any more or less than I did in 2022. It's just in terms of my rhetorical approach, I need to be more of a dick to them because my audience demands it. Yeah, I would have a problem with that too. Not because I don't want him to be more of a dick to conservatives. I do to an extent, but I want it to be because of the genuine disagreement
The
of the
disagreement.
right.
Right.
Completely agree. I
And
just
also,
that's
hold
not
on,
my
hold on, hold
understanding.
on, hold on, hold on.
Yeah.
Let me qualify that too, though, because not just the disagreements, but also to somebody who deserves it. If you're having a conversation with Connor, you may vehemently disagree with his position about the Twitter leaks, which I would argue Destiny, I think, approached that a little dishonestly, because I think if he was unbanned just a little earlier, he probably would have had a little more charity towards Twitter, but that's neither here nor there. But I think in that discussion with Connor, who has great respect for him, has given him nothing but big ups, has history of being extremely good faith, and then you beat on him like that, it kind of adds credence to what I'm saying about his equalizing mentality of I have to be mean to this man now because he's a conservative.
Do you
Now,
think
whether
it's
or not that comes from his audience or it comes from him feeling like he needs to even the score is neither here nor there. I just see my opinion being justified a little bit in that interaction.
Are you
That's
open to
all.
the possibility that it was two things at play? Maybe three things. Number one, maybe we caught him in it because Destiny. Listen,
Yeah, he's moved
Destiny is
fluctuate.
very
Yeah.
Destiny is very calm and tries to present himself as this master of stoicism. He's not. He is
He's
as
not.
prone. He's
No,
as
yeah,
prone to temper tantrums as much as anybody. Is it
right.
possible that we number one we caught him on a bad day? Number two, because Connor also likes to drop f bombs and get escalatory and he likes the blood sports thing and then walk away with no harm, no foul. that maybe Destiny felt like more comfortable, like he could say, "Oh, you stupid mother," and just go back and forth with him in that respect. So that's two.
I think Destiny has that ability to do that with certain people, and know because he's very good at this, and he'll often brag that he's good at being assertive and angry and yelling, but still kind of giving off that, hey, this is friendly, or this is healthy banter, and I still love you kind of mentality. But with him, it was vicious.
Well, and number three, is it possible that in the moment he was that genuinely frustrated with Connor and felt that Connor was acting unusually conspiratorial for Connor's politics?
Impossible, because the standard of which he was holding Connor to, in reference to showing him proof of anti-conservative behavior, is a standard that he knows, and I know he knows, is unrealistic to expect from somebody. How could you ever in a million years expect there to be in the terms of service explicit language like we are targeting conservatives, or for there to be any leaks from internal correspondence, Slacks, or otherwise, where it says, hey, we hate conservatives? And I'll give you a good example of this, or maybe Destiny was just unaware of some of these things. But you had that woman, Alejandro Caraballo, who was what, trust and safety at Twitter, got absolutely owned in front of Congress when she was openly admitting that she was throttling conservatives. And then internal leaks from those Twitter leaks showed that she was trying to get the word groomer banned, that we know was turning into a right wing um, word, or a conservative word, to kind of get back at whatever the left wing positions were. And Joel Roth, who is, I think, head of safety as well, Twitter trust and safety there, was in those conversations, and they were bragging about FBI and DHS weekly meetings. And it turns out that this woman, Alejandra, had super egregious statements herself on Twitter, talking about stuff like the Supreme Court judges are an arm of white supremacy, and was calling for people to accost sitting judges. I mean, he knows this. I would think he knows this, or if he doesn't know this, how you could look at something like that and say that that's not an explicit target of conservatives, or at least harboring a culture within Twitter that is anti-conservative.
So I was curious. I know about Yoel Roth, but Alejandra Caraballo or Caraballo, I don't know if it's a double L or not, but I don't think she worked for Twitter. I think she's a journalist.
She a journalist? From my understanding, she was trust and safety, or at least was in conversations with Yoel Roth, who was
She may have been in conversations with him,
trying to
but
get
as far as I
groomer.
know, she never was employed by Twitter. She's a journalist, and I
Listen,
just did a Google
okay,
search here, and I don't see anything.
even if
Uh,
that's the case, though, um, this was in the Twitter leaks, was information about her and her conversations with Yoel Roth trying to get groomer banned. So,
Yeah, but that doesn't but see that, and that's the thing, and that's probably the third conversation we're gonna have to have, like, at length, and maybe, who knows, maybe we could end when we eventually have our big Twitter files conversation, maybe that's something we can get you in on. I don't know, but as far as the Twitter files are concerned, let's backtrack little bit. Number
yeah.
one, Connor's reputation. Let me just knock through this real quick, and I'll be super concise. Connor's
By the
reputation
way,
as
thank
a
you for being pretty good faith and letting me know you looked it up instead of trying to act like, because I appreciate that. Yeah.
no, I mean, well, because here's the thing, like some things, again, I try to be as fact based as possible. Like even there are times, even in conversations with Destiny, where I'm like, I'm 99% sure that I know this to be the case, but I hesitate because I'm like, dude, what if I'm wrong and I make an ass out of myself? And there have been times I've done that. So like even that, like I was like, man, I follow her on Twitter. I'm pretty sure she's just a journalist and she's never worked for Twitter before, but I wanted to double check. But yeah, no problem. There's anyone. I do not believe a single fucking person when they say that they had all this memorized. Don't believe them. Absolutely do not believe them. There's no every journalist and political scientist I know, before they have a debate or conversation, brushes themselves up on the facts, even if they teach the shit. So anyway, yeah, no problem there. But as far as like Connor's concerned, number one, I think Connor's reputation, as I told him this in a follow up conversation with Chud Logic, I think Connor's reputation with lefties and with liberals and people like Destiny and I and whoever else, I think it's a double edged sword. Yes, he should be given more of the benefit of the doubt. But by definition, we also expect more from him. So if someone like Destiny thinks that Connor's engaging in conspiratorial behavior, I understand where Connor's coming from. Like, dude, you should give me the benefit of the doubt because I've earned it. And Destiny's thinking, dude, it's precisely because I hold you to a higher standard that this is unacceptable to me. So it's just like they're missing each other. But I completely understand where Connor's coming from. That's why I try to treat him with as much good faith as possible and not engage in insults or raise my voice. Number one. Number two, as far as Twitter's bias is concerned, as far as conservatives, I don't think anyone in their right mind, and again, I don't know of any lefty who would say otherwise, if you ask them for a vibe check, like, hey, who do you think's getting banned off Twitter more? Or who seems to be high profile violations of TOS? I think most people would say conservatives.
Do you go ahead?
Well, no, what I was going to say is, but the thing is, it's not because they're proposing a regressive tax rate or a higher tax on the lower class or wanting to cut tax for the rich or, support a more robust military. It just so happens that this company has a more socially progressive terms of service in terms of like inclusivity, in terms of, misgendering, in terms of these things that, yes, are more likely to catch a conservative than a progressive. But that's not that, to me, that is a much more nuanced. There's no such thing as a private company having neutral terms of service, or we see it in Truth Social.
So you're saying because conservatives happen to violate Twitter's terms of services more because of their perspective or their ideology doesn't necessarily mean that Twitter's targeting conservatives.
Correct. Absolutely.
So then let me ask you this.
Sure.
If a law is passed that demands that black people use a different water fountain, would you say that law doesn't target blacks because blacks are just violating the law if they use a white person's water fountain?
Well, no, I would say that law is targeting blacks because it's a law. Well, let me finish. It's a law targeting based on an immutable characteristic over which a person has no control.
So if Twitter has terms that are directly antithetical to,
can you be conservative without misgendering somebody on Twitter? Yes. Can you be black and not? Yes.
Stop. How? If conservatives don't believe in the idea of misgendering, then it is antithetical to a conservative opinion. What do you mean?
I'm not asking if you can if using if not adhering to inclusive pronouns, if that's a conservative philosophy. I'm asking you, can you use a social media platform as a conservative and avoid misgendering somebody? I think the answer is obviously yes. Either address them by their name
and avoid purposely misgendering someone, sure. But what if I'm having a discussion with someone and I'm a conservative, and let's say I'm having a conversation with you, you're trans, and you say your pronouns are she and her.
Yeah.
And I'm having a conversation with you, and I say I ask you for your pronouns up front, and we're talking on Twitter, and I call you him, and I refer to you as him, your pronouns. You report me as misgendering you. And then as a conservative, I respond, and Twitter says you're going to get banned unless you change this.
Well, then you've purposefully misgendered me, right?
Wait. No, at first it was an accident because I didn't ask you for your pronouns. It's not within my philosophy to do so.
Sure.
You report me as misgendering you, and then Twitter demands that I delete that tweet, or I be suspended. And I say, well, no, I didn't mean to at first, and I'm not going to delete the tweet because it's against my philosophy in the first place. But I didn't know that this person identified as such, and when I said it, it was a mistake. But I'm not going to delete the tweet because it's against my philosophy, and that person gets banned, which happens.
Sure,
that in only that particular term is anti-conservative
because but that's
you can't
wait a minute.
Language that is
wait a minute. Let's set that aside. Hang on.
Sure.
What I'm saying is you can't cite me a single example of a social media company or a company anywhere that doesn't there's no such thing as politically neutral terms of service on a social media company. Nowhere. Truth Social doesn't have one.
Back up. I know you're right. I agree with you. My argument is that Destiny isn't being charitable enough towards the idea that because the terms of service actually leans in one direction, that it inherently targets a
Wait a
political
minute,
ideology.
but that's the thing. Number one, Destiny would never ever argue, because if he did, he'd just be dead wrong, that Twitter's terms of service does not have a progressive bent towards it. He would never deny that.
But he's arguing, show me explicitly where it says we don't like conservatives, which I am arguing is an unrealistic standard to hold someone to, because it's never going
Because
to explicitly state that. It's just going to have language that benefits one political party or ideology.
that's a different claim. It's a different claim to listen. It is a fundamentally different claim, and you might not see much distinction there, but I do, and Destiny does. It's a fundamentally different claim to say, look, social media, Twitter, just use Twitter. Twitter's terms of service are biased towards progressives, and for one reason or another, either purposeful or accidental, it means a conservative is probably much more likely to violate those terms of service and get banned as a result.
I agree.
That is, wait a minute, that is a much more nuanced and reasonable argument that no one in their right mind, including Destiny, would ever disagree with. That is different than saying Twitter targets conservatives.
I agree, but he's asking Connor to show him
But
where.
Connor's making that claim. Connor's not making the
No,
nuanced claim.
watch the video back. Wait. Watch the video back. He explicitly states, Connor, that I am not stating that they are targeting or they are stating or that they are targeting conservatives for being conservative. He was arguing that the leaks prove that there was back end and shadow banning towards a political opinion that happens to align with conservatives. Now, you can argue that because of that, it is inadvertently targeting conservatives and it has a political bend. But what Destiny was, the standard that Destiny was holding Connor to show him an explicit statement as to where we don't like conservatives or we want conservatives not on our platform, was not only what Connor wasn't arguing, but was completely uncharitable towards the position that the terms of service are bent towards a leftist ideology,
It was
especially considering everything Destiny has gone through with getting fucking yeeted off half of these platforms.
right, and so that's why I'm telling you, I am almost certain, having been been in the conversation. Now, granted, it was like a 9. My God, it lasted forever. Because Destiny's been burnt by that bridge or that particular torch before. And number two, because I don't think, again, I'm telling you as a dyed-in-the-wool lefty that suppressing the story of Hunter Biden's laptop was absolutely a decision which benefited the left over the right. And Destiny, I cannot imagine Destiny ever taking issue with that. So to me, if he demanded, which I do seem to wait a minute. I do recall him demanding that proof from Connor, but I also seem to remember Connor saying the Twitter files are proof they targeted conservatives. I do recall Connor saying that. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe you listened to it more recently than I have, but that is reasonable for Destiny to go prove it.
But he did say that. But what he was talking about was clear, was that they were designed between the Hunter Biden laptop story, suppression of the story, and also the terms that it was designed to target conservatives. And of course, there's not going to be explicit language that says we hate conservatives, but every fucking decision that they make on the back end just seems to benefit the DNC or the leftist progressive opinion. Wait, hold on. And the thing about the Hunter Biden laptop story is I've heard Destiny argue multiple times about how this fell under the Twitter hacked materials policy and him actually advocating, saying that everything is conspiratorial in reference to them suppressing the story to help the DNC. And perhaps that's true. But from my understanding, Twitter actually expanded their policy, their hacked material policy, to try to fit in the laptop story so that they could suppress it. Is that accurate?
No, it's not accurate. Okay. If you look at the documents in the Twitter file, like the sworn statement from Yoel Roth and his attorney, the laptop violated. The laptop was interpreted to be a violation of the hacked materials policy at the time the policy was in effect. Then, after they actually decided to walk back their decision on the Hunter Biden laptop, then I'm pretty sure they updated their policy to reflect their subsequent decision to not suppress discussion of the laptop or anything else, just direct links or whatever to like the nude photos and everything.
But they weren't going to allow it to trend or circulate. You can only share it. It would not be boosted.
I don't recall that being in the I
Well,
recall that they
instead of us, yeah.
I recall that they said that it wouldn't trend when they initially banned it. That's true, but I don't recall after they let the after they walked it back and said, "Okay, look, you guys can talk about it. The only thing that you can't do is just link to articles or whatever with hacked materials in it."
Yeah,
Or
and I
quote,
also
hacked
remember,
materials.
and I also remember to that respect, I also remember Connor explicitly stating, "You might be right. I want to go back and I want to look at this a little more closely so we can have a better discussion about that because I believe that you're wrong." And then it there was a constant and relentless harping on basically calling him a conspiracy theorist,
So
basically berating him for literally saying, "Let's go back and let's have a discussion about that." Which is
yeah,
what I'm going to say to you right now is instead of me trying to debate with Destiny Mean, maybe it is better I have a conversation with him, and maybe it's better that me and you actually set up a conversation for you and I to discuss the Twitter files after we could both maybe take a
yeah, so and I'd be open to that as well. We'll add that to the fourth pile of things.
yeah,
That's
yeah.
okay because we're gonna be long
In
term
November,
collaborators.
you know.
Yeah, but the only thing I would just say is again, and maybe you were just paraphrasing, so I don't want this as a gotcha. But when you said Connor was making the case that the policy was designed, I recall you saying that about 3 minutes ago, was designed to target conservatives. Again, I think that there's a very important distinction to be made there. I will absolutely agree with you that the decision to suppress the Hunter Biden story benefited the Biden campaign and therefore the Democrats and therefore the left in
Right,
general.
but you're not saying it was designed to
No, and
help
there's
or
no and
hurt the
there's no
conservatives.
evidence to support that. And furthermore, consider a counterfactual. What if they'd made the opposite decision? You know what? This potentially violates the hacked materials policy, but we're going to let it go.
Like
Would
they
you
did
be
with
saying?
Trump's tax returns, you mean?
Would you be saying, well, they didn't, but they didn't link to hacked material. They only linked to articles discussing the hacked material. They didn't link to actual, like anything that had a link to the leaked tax returns. It was not allowed. It was also suppressed on those same grounds. That's the difference. It would link to articles talking about the Hunter Biden leaks. But if that link had pictures of dick and crack and whatever else or potential violations of the hack materials, then Twitter wouldn't allow it. That was the distinction.
Did they suspend the New York Times like they suspended the New York Post? Or?
The New York Times, I'm 90% sure the New York Times link didn't include the hacked material or the leaked material in it. 99% sure.
What did
Whatever
it didn't include a link to the article that had the tax return or the assessment of the
it
tax
didn't
return?
have
Oh,
it did not have the actual copies of the leaked tax returns in it. It was only an article about the leaked tax returns. That's the difference. The issue with the New York Post article wasn't that it was about a leaked laptop or a potentially leaked laptop. It had contents from a potentially leaked laptop in it, like pictures and information.
potentially hacked, you mean?
Right. Yes, potentially hacked. So, but getting back to it, let's consider a counterfactual where they did allow the Hunter Biden story to stand. As a
Mhm.
conservative, would you be saying they made a decision designed to benefit conservatives?
Um, I think that's a tough one because if you're allowing a story, you're allowing people to make a judgment call. When you're suppressing a story, you're making the call for them.
Well, no, because I would. Well, the story, you can't be agnostic on the story, right? The story being there's a reason that they tried to make this an October surprise because just by getting it out there, just like all misinformation, it does poison the well. Information or misinformation, it influences, right?
Right.
So, my are you saying that does why was the Republican Party, why was the Trump campaign, and why were conservatives upset that the link was suppressed? Because they wanted it to influence the election, which means they knew just the link being out there would have an effect, right?
Of
So
course.
clearly it's not neutral.
Right.
It's either the link being there benefits conservatives or the link not being there benefits liberals. It
Right,
benefits.
the link being there, you're deciding to take no action versus taking an action.
Well, no,
So if you're arguing, hang on, you're arguing that allowing it to stand is as much of an action as actually suppressing the story
I'm
by
not even
killing
saying it's
by
I'm not even
killing.
saying it's as much. I'm saying it is an action one way or another, and I don't know if it's even
That's what I'm
point
saying. Yeah, you're saying it's as much of an action to leave the story than it is to suppress the story is what you're saying, correct?
when you
That's
have
the
to
claim you're
make
making.
when you have to make a decision about a thing that potentially violates a policy, letting it stand is an action, suppressing it is also an action. There's no agnostic here. You have to make a choice. Do I keep it up or do I take it down?
But how
There-
but it was not hacked, the laptop. So
They they well, based on their hacked materials policy, it did violate because it had like private, it had like email addresses, nude pictures, things like that that they had absolute reason to believe were the products of a hacked materials policy. Based on the information,
from
they
my
knew it.
understanding from my understanding, the from my understanding, the fact that it was hacked, it was determined that it wasn't hacked material afterwards. Is that wrong? Again, I
We
gotta brush up on this so
we
long ago.
we well, no, so it wasn't hacked because it was left in the hands of that. Well, according to the
Right, what I'm
information
saying
they
is
had.
what I'm saying is, from my understanding, Twitter eventually determined that it actually did not violate the policy originally. Is that correct?
No, 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 no. They determined it did violate the policy at the time.
No, no, I'm
The
saying I know at the time. I'm saying afterwards, they actually determined
Yes, because
that
I don't think, as far as I know, you still can't share pictures of Hunter Biden's dick or his private email address or anything like that. There's still contents that will still get you banned. Um,
I'd have to look at it because I wonder, that's a good question. I probably agree with you, but I think I wanna look at it a little more because
Feel
I
free, because I could be wrong on it, and I'll be honest with you, I don't look for, like,
no,
I
because
keep
I
it's
think
kinda
yeah,
it's kinda surprising to me to this day. I still have to remind myself that pornography is on Twitter because the accounts
I
I
know.
follow are not
Yeah.
pornographic. So as far as I know, there's still no you there they might be there, but they're my understanding is they're not there very long. Like pictures of Hunter Biden's genitals or pictures of him with hookers or whatever, all these things, like that's still not allowed on Twitter as far as I know, nor like social security numbers or banking information or private email addresses, blah, 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 all these things are still not allowed on Twitter.
By the
And
way
that was hmm?
Crack and whores is pretty fucking based. I don't know why
Well, I know. I mean, see, if he had ran for president himself, he would have won by an even bigger margin. Instead of winning by 7 million votes, a Biden would have won by like 70. Like
yeah.
Trump wouldn't have gotten a single one. But anyway, but my thing is, I don't think a conservative would accept the argument from, and maybe you would because you're not cookie cutter, but I don't think most Republicans, conservatives, I don't even know if Connor would accept the idea like, hey, look, they let the laptop story stand. So they implemented a policy or effectuated a policy. They interpreted a policy in a way that was designed to benefit the Republican Party or Donald Trump. I don't think they would accept that. I think a conservative would say, no, no, no. It just so happened in this particular instance to benefit Trump and conservatives, but that wasn't the intention. Like that's not the goal, the fiendish goal. Like yes, anything to get Trump elected. So that's where I think it was ultimately the issue with Connor in Destiny is I think they're both prone to hyperbole. They're both prone to aggression. They're both prone to, use. And I think they both overstated or Connor overstated his position. And then Destiny, I understand where you're coming from in terms of the burden of proof. Um, but that's also why we were supposed to eventually have a follow-up conversation. And it didn't happen because of Destiny's internet. I don't know if it'll happen now because I think the meta's probably moved so far past it. But we were all like four of us were supposed to have another conversation again about it, and it just didn't happen. So
Yeah. I mean, I'll leave with this because I gotta get to some family. But I'll leave with this. I think I agree with you that I would argue probably that yeah, it would be an action that benefited the Republicans if they allowed it to stand. However, I think there's probably a philosophical conundrum we can get into if later it was decided that it actually did not originally violate the even if they thought at the time it violated the hack materials policy. I think there's a philosophical conversation we can have if later it came out that it didn't actually originally violate the policy and if they allowed that story to stand. You follow what I'm saying? Like, I feel like we could have a deeper discussion on that because if it turns out
Like that they tried to contour the policy, like they felt at the time it really didn't violate it as written, so they tried to contour it around it.
not even,
They
not even, not even. And what I'm even if Twitter thought at the time it completely violated the policy, but then it turned out later, and they left it, and then it turned out later that it didn't actually violate the policy. Versus they feel like it violated the policy, so they took down the story, and then later it came out that it didn't actually violate the policy. I feel like there's a philosophical conversation we can get into where you could kind of say, this is why sometimes it's beneficial to just kind of leave shit the way it is because you're kind of damned if you do, damned if you don't, if you take the action of removing it. Um, Now, whether or not you agree with that, I feel like you could have a kind of a good conversation as to whether,
Well, it's ultimately about where you wanna err, right? And you may
yeah,
wanna err on one place, and I might wanna err a
exactly.
different place.
Yeah.
But and listen, I think that some of these conversations are still worth having, even if there's no objective determination for it. Like, this is that's the thing about matters of philosophy, right? You can make a reasonable case either one, and it ultimately comes down to preferences. And I still think conversations like that are worthwhile. So that might be our 5th conversation that we need to have. Well, I'll do this. I will download this file, and it's going to be, I think it's a joint file. It's going to be like it's an MP4, so with the video and audio. I just need you to send me like an email address that I can Google Drive this to, because there's no way this file is going to be however many gigabytes, so it's not going to go through a Discord thing. So you just got to give me like where you want me to. I'll put it in
If you put it on a Google Drive, you can just share the link to the
oh,
Google Drive
perfect.
account, yeah,
Then happy to do
in
that.
Discord, yeah, yeah, and
Perfect.
then I'll be able to download it right from there, yep.
Perfect. Well, man, listen, I'm glad we did this. I will either it's either going to go one of two ways. I'm either going to break this up into segments and upload it one at a time and try to milk this for content and then release the whole thing on my channel. I'm just going to be lazy and release the whole thing on my channel, but I'm going to send you the file either way. I'm trying to get, like I said, like not two, 3 to 4 videos a day. So part of me, since we talked about so many interesting things, part of me is going to want to, you know, talking with, center rightist about immigration, and then
Right, right, right.
so do whatever you want with it. I'll share it with you. You can do whatever you want with this file. If you want to clip it for me saying wildly inappropriate things with just a bunch of jump cuts, you can do that too. I'm just kidding.
Honestly,
But
I
yeah,
probably will just wind up uploading the whole thing just like you.
sure. And do me a favor. Are you going your politics channel? Is it live yet? Are you unveiling it yet? Because I will tag you
It
in
it
my
is
video.
it is live, I have just 2 shorts on there, I gotta get the other streams that I did up on there,
Will you
I
send
was
me the
gonna
link?
yeah, I was gonna stream to there tonight, but for some reason, I went to stream and it says I had to enable streaming, and then I did, and then now it said I had to wait 24 hours, so I couldn't actually stream this to it.
To your
Um,
YouTube?
yeah, to the YouTube. I even tried to turn on my video. If you see, I keep turning on the
It
video.
well, I see you. I
It's
see you there.
skipping though,
Damn, what a
right?
handsome looking guy. But
Yeah,
you're jittery. You're very
yeah.
jittery for whatever reason.
I don't know why, so that's
And it, honestly, man, because this is browser based, it could be on my end. Has my audio or video lagged for you?
no, no, you're actually really
Okay.
clear. And you're using Restream. Have you ever heard of what's the StreamYard? I know a lot of people use that too.
Dude, I have here. Okay, so here's the reason I use this. I know everybody uses like OBS. I use Streamlabs because I'm told Streamlabs is much more user friendly, and so far it has been. It's also much more
Just use OBS.
intense on
I
your.
could help you with it if you want.
Oh, I appreciate that. My understanding of Streamlabs is much more intense than OBS on your computer. I've got a
Yeah.
pretty decent computer, but here's my frustration. And I see Destiny do this, and he's able to do it well. But like, so I can't trying to figure out how to I can't stand unused space. So this is one of the things I like about Restream is how we're going to be occupying the full screen. You're going to
Yeah.
have one half, and I'm going to have the other half. I don't know how I don't see how people. I've never seen somebody do that through OBS or Streamlabs.
You
It's like
can, and I could show you how to do it too, yeah.
you can.
Yeah,
Okay,
you can, if someone's calling in, you'll do it through Discord, right? Like, you'll just
right.
open up a video call through Discord, and then you can actually take the video portion of the Discord as a scene, not as a scene, as a source, and then just split it up on your OBS screen. I'll help you out. And then the other thing is too, are you streaming to just YouTube?
I I restream to Twitch as well, but I
Okay, you
just
do.
I mostly try to stick to YouTube. I'm basically going to be YouTube focused for this year.
Yeah, I was gonna say
Yeah.
because YouTube is better because you can increase the bit rate on YouTube to up to like 45,000 or 50,000 for your videos, and it makes
Hmm.
them a lot clearer.
Right.
Twitch only allows up to 2,000 bit rate, and it I hate it.
Are
Um,
you doing Twitch this year? Or are you going
I
to do
was
both? Or you?
I was doing both, but I think I'm with you. I think I'm just gonna do solely YouTube because I heard that a lot of people saying Twitch is on its way out, especially political
That's
stuff.
what I hear. Because
So
doesn't like Hassan, Vosh and Destiny are banned, right? And then Hassan doesn't interact with smaller streamers,
yeah, and then
right?
there's like no discoverability on there. Yeah, I'll probably just move to YouTube full time,
You
to
know
be
what you
honest.
should do? And I'm thinking about this too. I'm thinking about getting a jacuzzi. All right. And then just, you know
Yeah.
where I'm going with this, right?
Oh,
I've
yeah,
got it like
hot
a
tub,
real,
baby.
bro. Yes. Here's what I'll do. I'll end up going to New York for like a weekend stream and we'll just like wear some like string bikinis, and see if we can make it work. Right. Listen,
That's it.
you got to do
Only
whatever to increase the viewership.
we
We
gotta
might make
start
it
an o
5 minutes before we get banned, but
yeah,
you
we
know,
gotta start an OnlyMans, that's all.
an only man's nice. I like that. Dude, I'm glad we did this. I appreciate it. Thank you for taking the time. And we'll do this again soon. And I'll again, for whatever it's worth, I'll reach out to Destiny in private and see like, hey, look, I got a reasonable conservative, as rare as they are. We're going to make him a Democrat before too long, but he's got some disagreements with you about some things, and I think it'd be a productive conversation, and maybe that could happen.
Alright, we'll see. Thanks, man. Yeah, yeah, let's do it again. I'm free whenever, so if we can actually make this a weekly thing, but that's up to you, you know?
Oh, I'd like I'd be down for it to be a regular. I don't know about weekly because I'm still I don't know about you. Are you looking to stream? Because see, I'm not except for on occasion. Like I'm looking to just be like a video and video essay creator.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I'm looking to stream because currently I don't really have the time to put in the effort. I'm gonna
Fair.
private link you my tech YouTube, and I'm a
Sure.
little bit of a perfectionist. You'll see from like the editing and stuff, and the amount of time that goes into it in the way that I would probably want to present it, it's just gonna take me too much time. So I'm gonna
Does it
try to
ever
do it the
piss you
low
off
output
to
route.
see wildly successful video essayists and streamers who don't seem to put like any effort into their like it blows it
Yeah,
just
it's frustrating to an extent, but also I think, a lot of that comes from just being at the right place at the right time, and then also just having someone who boosted you. I mean, it's like Destiny said, he put you on his platform. That's it. You have 100 to 200 people who are going to watch you, and what you do from there is up to you, right?
right.
So if you put in the work and you stream, you're going to get more viewers. And I think Vosh, to his credit, did that very well.
I know.
Yeah, he built off of that's and to an extent, Mr. Girl. Mr. Girl got a little his ego got too big and he's a moron. So and a sociopath. So what eventually happened with him was what you would expect from an egomaniac, where he blew off a lot of interviews he shouldn't have. If he went on Lex Friedman and these other podcasts and things that he had the opportunity to do, he'd be huge right now. But instead he decided to take the supposedly moral route. But I think Tavash, to his credit, he did a really good job of feeding off that. So if you get a boost, you could skip a lot of steps. But I do think it's right place, right time because I've seen a lot of YouTubers and streamers too who don't have the greatest quality and don't put their face on camera and they don't get anywhere, you know?
I,
Look at Chud. Chud is pretty decent size, but it took him a long, long time, you know?
See, and so yeah, like I see that he's blowing up, and again, I'm going to send you a link. He doesn't stream, but just something to think about because he doesn't do really any editing. He records like for an hour privately like this, and then just literally cuts them up and like he doesn't have an intro outro. He just cuts them up and uploads them one at a time with a basic thumbnail. But he's killing it. He's awesome. Luke Beasley, big fan of his. He's a good friend.
I'll check him
That
out.
dude
Yeah.
that dude climbed 11,000 YouTube subs in like 5 weeks. It's insane. He's killing it. But yeah, dude, thank you for doing this. Get back to your family and we'll talk again soon, okay?
Yeah, for sure. Enjoy your night.
You too, buddy. Bye. Hey, you. Thanks for watching. If you liked the video, and I hope that you did, please hit the like and subscribe buttons below. And if you absolutely hated the video, the best revenge for you is also to hit the like and subscribe buttons below. That'll teach me. If you want to share an opinion or share some feedback, go ahead and leave a comment, all right? 2023 is a year of change, hence the aggressive rebrand and commitment to new content. Inspired by my friends Luke Beasley and STV Philly, my personal goal for this channel is to hit 40,000 subscribers by the end of the year. So I'm hoping you'll do me a solid by spreading the word and the videos to potential fans and hate watchers alike. And in the meantime, we'll be pondering politics again with you very soon.